3:03, so let's go ahead and get started. We'll go ahead and, as we have a quorum, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. And Mr. Boutin, would you be kind enough to give us our invocation?
Be happy to. Lord of all people, thank you for all the blessings that you bestow, not only on this board, but all those in attendance and for our entire community. We thank you for all you do, and hopefully that you will guide us to make the best decisions on behalf of our community. We have many things to consider today. Help us to be efficient and cordial and cooperative, and make the best decisions with your guidance in mind. One last request for rain for our community. We need it desperately. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, sir. Mr. Russell, lead us in the pledges.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you. Is it hot enough for everybody today? Just right. Okay, this is a special meeting of the ODC board. Our regular meeting will, of course, be next Thursday. So we're now at item 3, where we will discuss and review the fiscal year 23 and 24 economic development contractor proposal from the Odessa Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Tom Mansky, who informed me he had way better things to do than hang out with us, so he'd like to go first.
If that's an excuse that we're allowed to make,
Can we all do that?
can I, yeah.
Actually, good afternoon, by the way. Mr. Beecham and I rode up in the elevator together, and we had a proposal we're going to bring before you next week, but I thought I'd just mention it today. In the future, any meeting day that the temperature's above 95, could we conduct that meeting by Zoom?
Second.
Okay. Because it's not far enough drive for my air conditioner to totally kick in by the time I get over here. So, I'm sure you have our proposal in front of you, and I can go through it, or if you've already got predestined questions, I'd be happy to address them. You will notice, I think we had about a 20% increase in our request. Before I delve too deeply into that, I will mention that we also operate under the figure if we only spend it if we have to, and if we don't spend it at the end, which we do every year, going back as far as most people can remember, we write a check to the city of Odessa and return unspent dollars. And so in addition to getting audited for the ODC, we get audited for the chamber also. So we have 2 audits conducted on what we do, and so far everything has been so good. You won't notice much on changes on items from what we did last year. There are a few. I'll explain the 3 big things, and I brought these to a couple of board members' attention and would be happy to discuss them. One is under salary and wages, and I believe in our cover letter you will see that I was proposing an additional staff member that would spend a majority of their time at City Hall working with the city's development team. Obviously, this would involve buy-in from the new city manager and working closely with their development team, planning and development, permitting, engineering, public utilities, things of that nature, communicating. This position would be intended to hold the hand, essentially, of whoever comes in, whether they're doing an expansion, it's a new business, what have you. Walk them through the process, make them feel comfortable. Any questions arise, something's presented to them they don't understand, One of the things this person would need to become is an expert on impact fees. I've heard 2 presentations from people that were experts on impact fees, and both of them were different. And so it's an interesting deal, but we certainly need to get our arms around it and understand it. And having somebody that part of their job is focused on becoming an expert on that, I think it would be very beneficial.
Tom, I have
Yes,
a
sir.
question.
Yeah.
How would this person link to prospects? How would that occur? You know, again, I mean, how does this person identify, here's someone who's doing a project or whatever, and now I'm going to try to help them?
You'd have to be there at the front door when people come in, whether they're coming in to inquire about a building permit, things of that nature. And also, we would link them with projects that come to us. Like, you know, it's funny, people who maybe they're new to going out on their own, building a building, what have you. Chances are they're going to start at the city. If you're a site selector representing a large entity, 1.5 subsidiary of Oxy, you know you're going to call the Economic Development Group first. The site selectors are going to come to us. Tax consultants, which a lot of people use now in site selection, they come to us. But you have a lot of people that walk in the door and they're gonna, you know, they've been with so-and-so oil field services for 12 years and now they feel like they know they can do something, go out on their own, and they've got an entrepreneurial spirit. They may go directly to the city, and we would work with city staff to, if they may go to a certain department first and our person doesn't see them, that city staff says, we've got a liaison downstairs that can walk you through. And one of the good things about it, it's going to have to be a really good two-way communication. I mean, I started yesterday putting down bullet points on what may lead into the beginnings of this. And one of them is, you know, first you've got to sit down, probably a board leader, board president with and myself and the city manager, and talk about here's what we're trying to do. And we want to be a team player. You know, it's not anything adversarial or anything like that. Get the buy-in, and then maybe we may host a little lunch or something for all the development staff and all those people and talk about what we're trying to do, introduce ourselves. You know, I would obviously come around because I've got a team member at City Hall, and it's got to be a team. Your staff and the city staff have to work together, and I think we've operated through the years a little bit. I don't think it's been that way forever, but I think in recent years it's been a little bit of a silo on both sides, and this could be a good opportunity to get rid of the silos.
How would you try to find this person? You know, to be qualified and whatnot. What do you think it's going to take to? What type of person do you think this is going to be?
Self-starter, somebody that can. I don't want somebody that, you know, shy, introverted, going to sit there at a desk. They've got to be a self-starter. I mean, they, you know, if depending on the workload, you know, they may also be helping us do appointment setting for business retention and expansion visits. Could be an older gentleman or lady who might have a desire to come out of retirement. I'm just following the signals, but no, a good self-starting person that has the potential. I always ask people, where do you want to be in 3 years? You know, and if they say, well, I don't know, maybe, you know, in this position still. I don't necessarily lean on that. I had an interview once, and the young lady looked at me and said, I want to be in your seat right there in a year. And I'm like, wow, okay. And I wound up hiring her, and she was the best hire I ever made in 20-something years of doing this. And so, and also, I think I mentioned it in there, that it's somebody I would filter the candidates through the board. You know, probably come up with maybe a top 3. But you know, with not a ton of economic development experience in the region, and the difficulty in finding somebody like me, you can, you know, hook into coming out here. you know, it doesn't hurt to have somebody that could be part of the pipeline for years down the road. And I kind of pride myself, I may have told Chris this, I always look for people smarter than me because that pool is a lot bigger than the pool of people dumber than me. And at one point, I had 9 to 10 people that I had hired into the profession running their own organization. And I was really proud of that.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Could you step us through some of the big numbers on here?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
You know, the salaries and wages, I know we've got four, you and Tracy and two others there at the chamber.
We actually added that person in here too.
Okay, yeah, and
Yeah.
the liaison, okay.
So that's in there.
Kind of tell me what everybody does. I think I have a good handle on probably what you and Tracy do, but I don't know about the other two employees. What are their roles?
Kathy she handles all the admin stuff. She usually gets that first phone call and she knows where to direct it. She gets, which fortunately I don't have to worry about or Tracy doesn't. Some of them, you know, we have to answer, but she gets a lot of questions. Every day people call about, you know, when somebody breaks ground like that Dutch Brothers over there on Faldery, we're going to get calls. What is that? She handles all of our minutes, agendas. She does the ODC agenda for this group. She puts together any reports. She does the apartment study. She does like all of our housing studies, things of that nature. Now there's a couple of them that are more real estate related that Lindsay handles. Going into Lindsay, she handles all our social media. She is usually our media partners, Christy and her team. That's usually first contact. They reach to her or she reaches to them. And just today, we're putting together a new report. We had a couple of requests from some financial institutions. We've got a spreadsheet. It's not as reliable as I'd like that we ordered earlier in the year. It's over 6,000 employers in Odessa. And it does identify a bunch of those that happen to be a headquarter that's in Odessa. And we had a couple of financial institutions that wanted to know what headquarters we have. I said, we don't have that report, but we can put something together for you. I don't know how reliable it is and I explained how, to give you an example on the reliability, they list a school district. Well, the superintendent that they list in it apparently it's so far back that even Tracy, when I asked her, I don't know who this person is. And so, you know, the business the name is reliable. Some of them are out of business. That's the unreliable part. But I asked Lindsay to take all the ones on the spreadsheet that listed as a headquarter and copy those and paste them and start a new headquarter report. So she's doing that right now. And I let these businesses know that they'll have that next week. So we do things like that. And I know there's a bunch I'm forgetting. But Lindsay handles our CoStar, LoopNet items and all our social media and that stuff. Oh, and EDOIQ, which is our customer relations database.
Okay. And then we've got a 49,716 charge to the Chamber of Commerce. That looks like that's been in there for a while. What is that?
I'm looking at, we do a lot of admin, and I want to make sure I got the right line. You said 49?
Yeah, it's account number
5,000.
5,000.
Come on
Oh.
up, Renee.
There's 4,000. I don't know why it's not coming up here. Let me
I think
see.
that is the line item that is the shared expense for the accountant, human resources, also the front desk. And that amount has not changed at least in the 6 or 7 years that I've been here. It actually
there it is.
probably could go up, but it hasn't. So,
And that's really all the shared expenses. And we share with Discover Odessa. So there's a lot of things, if we were a standalone office, we would be paying on our own, that we split in thirds, so we get that benefit, splitting the cost into thirds.
Yes, that is split 3 ways.
What accounting would that be?
All of the
pay all
accounting
the-
that,
'Cause-
economic development, all the checks that go out,
oh, I'm sorry, I thought Seth did all that.
no.
So-
No, you should receive an email from Valerie every month. That is our balance, profit and loss year to date, and all of that, he's doing like the whole ODC as an organization. Valerie's breaking ours out just as your economic development contractor. So the numbers you get from Valerie are just ours.
And it's this entire budget, everything that, any invoice that comes in, all the checks that,
Is it the audit
This-
on the financials
all of it.
Yeah.
that our contract requires?
Yes.
And then we also, because I think she blind copies it, and I may be not correct on that, but I think she does. She also sends that to city management and all the council. And whoever it's stipulated in the contract,
All of you
Yeah.
should be receiving it. And all our HR, any payroll, anything, she takes care of all of that.
Skip on down the list just a little bit to dues and subscriptions. We've got $90,000, give or take there. Can you kind of break that down for me, Tom?
Yeah. And you notice we did come down a little bit on that. It was at 106 and we're down to 89. I found where my line was. I didn't bring my cheaters either, Larry, so. And I will get to that. We have a lot of things in there, some of our big ticket items. We do LoopNet and CoStar every month. That's about $800, little over $800 a month to do both of those. Most economic development corporations have that. That's all your real estate information. You contact us and say, I need 120,000 square feet. I need it on rail, or I need it next to real estate. I need at least 10,000 square feet of that as office. I'd like it to have 2 25-ton cranes. We put all that in there, and they tell us if we have it or not, or they pull up something close to it. It can also tell us if leases, matter of fact, Lindsay was able to start compiling the reports about a month ago. You can start pulling up when leases are going to expire in the next 12 to 24 months on manufacturing buildings. And so we're going to be sending out information to companies that maybe they're within a year or two of their lease expiring. And so it can do that for us also.
Where does that information come from? Where do they pull it up from?
You know, I don't know where LoopNet or CoStar, either one, get it, but they're the most dominant in the field. I think most of your local realtors have subscriptions to them. And so I'm not sure whether they get all theirs or if they compile it from a variety of things.
Recorded leases.
Yeah, they probably, once it's recorded, they have a way to get that. And I don't know if they're, how maybe they hack into ECAT or someplace.
Yeah.
Do you know if any of the other entities, pull those same ones like LoopNet or CoStar, kind of like what we talked about at partnership is, it seems like the school district pulls, pays for a bunch of subscriptions, and so does the county, and so does the city, and so do we. And is there a crossover there to where we could all kind of share together and cut some expenses?
I really don't see where the school district would need it because it's a real estate type deal as opposed to demographic. The city might, I haven't inquired, to be honest with you. And I don't know if there's anybody in the room that would know if the city has that. I can certainly inquire on that one. County, I would doubt. If unless you do economic development or you're into real estate or you have a lot of real estate, I don't know why you would necessarily need them. And they're not as you can see, that's about $800 a month. A couple of monthly deals that we do every month, the Dallas News, Houston Chronicle, and Wall Street Journal, that adds up to about $110 a month. And we're just, we stay on top of business and what's happening, or if somebody's moving or somebody's growing. a venture capital group just invested, $30 million in a pharmaceutical company. Well, where are they at and where are they going? We look at things like that. The business journals, that's 400 a year. Some of the big ones, let me see. We do MailChimp, which is, they all really, they kind of add up. MailChimp is $55 a month, but we use that to send out the Ingram Odessa Economic Report every month. We send out the Business Development Report, some of those things. And I believe because I requested it earlier in the year, we've added all of y'all to that. You should be getting it.
Is High Ground in that?
High Ground is in that. Let me see. I was looking for them.
Chris, while he's looking, I think that partnering on some of these subscriptions is probably worth looking at, but in my experience for these subscription services, they charge per user, and they won't allow license sharing across entities, so I don't know
That
if
would
we
work
get
anyway.
anywhere with that or not, but it's worth looking into.
It's kind of like Netflix. They're kind of trying to figure out how to not allow that anymore.
Or like LexisNexis,
Yeah.
it's a price per user, price per attorney in the firm, and so there's not a lot of flexibility.
High Ground is in here at 25,000. TEDC is in here. We do a cost of living subscription. Those are two good size. We're a member of the U.S. Chamber. That's $400 annually. Moving further down, there's some software subscriptions. They're not huge. Canva Pro, which is like a graphic design thing, is $130 a year. We do SurveyMonkey because we do some surveys annually. Sometimes we're requested, sometimes we reach out maybe to a certain type of business when we're talking to somebody, what do they look for? Let me see here. EDOIQ, which is a software package. That's one Lindsay's, that's our customer relations management package. That's $8,400 annually. We also have, which really combined is not even $100. There's a couple of things, SHRM related, which is the human resources deal, and we only pay for a third of that. That's another one of our shared deals that we get to enjoy. We'd have to pay for the whole thing if we had an HR/accounting person all on our own, and we'd have to pay that salary and all the benefits, but we don't have to. Team Texas is on here. That's $8,000, and we're an active member of that. As a matter of fact, Christy brought up last month that we're going to have Team Texas here, their membership and some site selectors at the end of this month. I'm looking for some more that are relatively substantial. Industrial Asset Management Council, which I'm a member of, that's $1,750 annually. And that's a very good economic development participation. You deal with all your big commercial brokers, realtors, things of that nature. Chimera Economics and Analytics, that's $10,500 a year. For that one, they do a lot of our studies. They cost of living, wage comparisons, things of that nature. They provide that information to us.
Like something like that, Tom, how do we use that information?
A lot of times we'll use it with a prospect when they're asking, people here that the cost of living is high here. So we do comparisons with other communities, which really, going back in the past, we were. But a lot, with the pandemic and everything, housing and things really jumped in other markets in Texas. And so now, we can show that it's not that different. That list I got, I mentioned earlier, that had over 6,600 businesses on it. We got that through Chimera, that subscription. And so a lot of times it'll depend on what people are looking for. We get requests, at least weekly, we'll get requests on something economic. And so we try to put it together, unless it's, hey, I'm Billy Bob and I'm standing here on the interstate and I thought I'd call you and ask you for a report. Okay, well, drop by and talk to us, and then we'll see. But, a lot of times it may be somebody we know. It could be a site selector who we didn't even know that they had us on their radar on a particular project, and they're saying, hey, look, I've got a client who's asked about X. Can you answer that for me? And then we find the answer. Because the worst thing is not to be able to answer. And if you get to that level where you just flat can't out answer, then you have to be honest and say, hey, we can't answer that one. So.
There's also $19,000 in advertising, another $8,000 in PR. I'm curious as to what that is, because I thought all that would be going through current media.
Let me pull that up for you. PR is a number of that is local things that we throw our support at to get our name out among local groups. Sometimes like YPO may do something. I see here like we've done a 40 under 40 program for them for $350. If somebody's doing an event or a banquet, which I personally feel like it would be good for us to have a presence at, we will pay for like the table out of that. I know there's been a couple of things that I've sent an invite to y'all. Larry, I know not too long ago we forgot the event. We had a table and you joined us. And I know there was at least one other board member, but I can't remember who. Maybe it was David. But so when we get tables and stuff like that, and we don't use it all necessarily, but we put it in there just in case. And then on advertising, those are we do the airport display, the billboards. I put in there this time. I looked at the amount of money that was spent the last time Renee went out on a hire, and that was to hire a new economic developer, and what that budget was as far as some of that money is job postings, Indeed, things of that nature. There's a deal in there for I put a dollar amount in there for Target Industries just because Christy and I have had discussions on that. We may not spend that. She may have plenty in her budget, but I just put it there just in case. And like I said at the beginning, if we don't spend it, it's coming back in a check to the city. But the airport display is $400 monthly. Then we pay a quarterly deal on billboards, and that is $1,200 a quarter. I budgeted $200 monthly for Target Industries without anything yet to spend that on, and we may not. But it's there if Christy and I put our heads together on something and we need to put in a little more money from our end. Obviously, the lion's share of advertising will be coming from our media partners.
Yeah, I mean, just as a comment, it'd be my preference that anything advertising related goes through our advertising contract. That way we make sure we're maintaining consistent messaging.
I'm not going to develop anything on my own. I mean, I know branding and we've got a good brander back here. And anytime there's discussion, we talk a lot. As a matter of fact, she may not want to take my phone calls anymore. But no, Tom is not going to leave the reservation on his own and come up with some crazy thing. If we needed to dip into that money, it's because Christy and I, or members of her team, got our heads together. So.
What about that 51,000 prospect development?
That one, let me just get to it. That's all encompassing in dealing with prospects. When we had a couple of big meals in December with that electronic vehicle battery manufacturer, we put those in here. I'm flying out Sunday night to Austin. I'm meeting 3 individuals from that company. We've got meetings scheduled all day, Monday and Tuesday, including with TCEQ, the governor's office, his economic development team, TEDC. We also have a meeting with Representative Brooks' staff. We're taking them to their office. And then at another time, we have a meeting with Senator Sparks' staff. We've already talked to them, told them we're bringing in a company that they will share what they're comfortable sharing with these folks. But they also have the ability to try, if need be down the line, to try to find some possible other dollars out of the state to help support something like this. And it doesn't hurt if we need to down the line that they, put a bug in the governor's ear if for some reason we needed that to happen. And so
Your travel expenses associated with these.
With that.
That's where it hits that line item.
that hits that. I'm sorry, I'm lengthy. That's just how I am. And no hard feelings if you just say, Tom, shut up. That's enough. So, but yeah, that's what comes out of there. On those trips, any meals, meetings, expenses, things of that nature. Was there a question I didn't answer?
Trade shows is just what we spend on setting up giveaways, things like that at trade shows. Is that what that is?
Yeah, now on the swag, some of the swag comes out of promotion, but yeah, like when we go to different trade shows, when we are an active participant, typically what we do to save money, because it's a lot more expensive if you do it on your own, a lot of the trade shows we will join in as a partner to Encore or Team Texas. Someone like that, they will pay the big booth fee, which, some of these could be $100,000, believe it or not. We can join in for, on some of them, as little as $1,000. So we don't have to pay the big fee. And then they will allow local communities to do that. Now, the only difference is typically, especially Team Texas, we cannot hand out Odessa stuff at the booth, and we can't wear Odessa shirts or things like that. So we're Team Texas. But then two things. One is we're do a geo-fence, thanks to Christy and her team. We're geo-fence the event. But when we get back after the event, then we hand that list of contacts over to Lindsay, and we go after our contacts.
Excellent. Any other questions for Tom?
Oh, the land development?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I put that in there. That is, and I sent a couple of you information on that. I'm going to send the rest of the board information after this meeting, some links on what some other people are doing. That's to research and explore the opportunity that maybe we look at the development of a business park. A lot of communities are doing those through their development corp, and they're using it as an incentive separate from, like, you may get out of offering cash incentive down the road. You may say, hey, we've got sites, unless they have an existing building and they're expanding or something. But we've got these sites over here, and we can certainly negotiate a good deal to make it worth your while to build something in our business park. A couple of good examples on some links I sent out earlier. Rockwall, Temple, Texas, Lampasas, I think's one, but a lot of previous community I worked in, we had a really great one, 372 acres, I think, in Palestine. And that's what we use to incentivize companies to come there. When I mentioned it to a couple of members of the board, this is not just going out and spending the 50,000. We have to have a legitimate reason to research and explore this opportunity. That money may be, if I come back to y'all and say, hey, here's what we have over here, I think it's a good opportunity. Maybe we want to put an option on this property. Here's how much the option would be, and here are the terms.
It's just a contingency?
Do what?
It's a contingency or?
Well, I mean, the money's just sitting there so we wouldn't have to possibly come back and do a budget amendment and then go through council and everything. If there's something that I bring to y'all that you as a board deem it's worth spending some money on.
I see.
Same with the workforce programs. We're just, I budgeted $120,000 and they're $10,000 a month. We don't have those programs yet. Now, Tracy and I are meeting monthly with Christy Pruitt and her team out at Odessa College in the workforce Permian Basin, workforce development Permian Basin. So I think we have an opportunity. Plus, I know some members of the board have talked about having a workforce summit, which we probably need to delve deeper into sooner than later. If we had a summit type meeting and we provided coffee break or what have you, and that thing's $1,200, we've got a budget there that we can take it out of if it's for workforce.
Tom, would it be fair to say that you, with regard to land development, workforce programs, you wouldn't spend the money until you got the board's go-ahead that we want to do this? You would come to us
Correct.
and say, here's a program, or here's a project, or whatever, so that those funds, even though they're approved and they're in your budget, you wouldn't spend them until you got board approval that says, we're going in this direction. And
Yeah.
And here's where we're going to spend this money.
Now, if it was like an immediate deal, something which I don't foresee that, we needed approval really quick, it would be something like, Chris, could we call a special meeting? Obviously, it'd have to be more than 72 hours. But, and obviously, I'd explain to the board president, this is why, and then he would, no, we're not doing that. But I'm not going to bring something like that to you guys unless I felt like it was, urgent. I'd certainly explain it. But yeah, I'm not going to go out and spend the money until I've run that.
On the workforce, of course, that follows the projects of industry when they come in and the jobs that are made, but workforce typically follows those moves.
Well, you're like, workforce is kind of all encompassing in whatever affects it. You've got prior to it, do we have workforce? Do we have skilled workforce? Do we have enough to bring this company here?
Right.
And certainly in our market, there's also going to be, depending on what this new project may be, there's going to be some stealing of employees. Locally. It's just going to happen because things are pretty tight. We have the third lowest unemployment rate right now for an MSA in Texas.
So the workforce development is opening people's eyes to the opportunity to get them here, to fulfill jobs that are already existing, or?
It's actually a little different, Larry. One of the thoughts is, because it is hard to bring people in, it's
Yes.
more of, let's figure out a way to grow our own.
Right.
It could be a program that we start maybe even in high school and through junior college and UTPB
Right.
in combination with internships with our local companies that are already here that says, if you need employees, let's go ahead and grow them and show these kids or these young adults, look, we've got a career path for you and we'll help you
Right.
get there. You know what I mean? And so that's the more of a thought of, instead of trying to attract them and bring them in from other areas,
Right.
is let's take the folks that are from here and let's develop a workforce on our own.
Right, developed from local.
Well, an attraction is an element. That may not be the best for us.
Yeah.
Certainly growing our own is big. And so what does that look like?
Well-
Workforce housing is an issue. In a meeting previously, we talked about daycare. The cost of it, obviously has potentially some members, potential members of the workforce sitting on the sidelines because maybe it's a spouse. It's better economically for them to stay home rather than put 2 to 3 kids in daycare because of the cost of that. So how do we affect that? And I think there's so many issues to it. We probably need to bring our heads together and determine what are the things that we can have an effect on, and how quick can we address those things as an ODC?
I look at it kind of like Field of Dreams, build it and they will come, you know what I'm saying? But when you're looking at the local, enhancing the local, and our colleges and everything are good, everything's on the upswing. And I see your point there, but I see people every day, I deal with them. Guy lives in Amarillo yesterday, says I come here, I can work at home, but all the money's here. But then on the other side, I look around to bid something. Last week, 2 jobs, I expected to be $3,000 a job, and each one of them, their menial job, were $12,000, 4 times what I'd always paid before, 4 times. So somebody's making money, so, I mean.
And that's what we've
ought
talked
to
about.
attract people.
In large cases, the difference in the cost of stuff like that is the lack of labor.
Yeah.
So it's lack of supply, demand, that
Right.
type of thing. But a lot of cases, what we're seeing, even the cost of housing is so high because we don't have the contractors to build the houses. We have so many come in from Lubbock or other areas to build because we just don't have the contractors because we're competing with the oil field. So what can we do to help grow them? And, and you'll probably hear me say it again, but my goal is the 3 R's. We want to recruit them, we want to retain them, and we want to retire them if we can. And it's a lot easier to do that with folks that are from this area than just to try to bring somebody in out of a Dallas or a San Antonio or across the country that, that don't understand the West Texas culture. So this was kind of the thought is put a little money into the workforce programs and look at, what can we do to do that? Or, maybe it's to attract others and that type of thing. But that seems to be one of our biggest barriers to economic development is workforce.
And with your, with your 2 good higher ed institutions here in town, you hate to export knowledge.
Yeah.
Have them go through the system, learn a lot, and then they're on I-20 heading east. So,
And that was some of the things we talked about and kicking around, some of this was, if we can help on the economic development to develop a program like that and create this career path for some of these young adults and kids, that, there's a little golden handcuff on the other side of it. If we put in the monetary resources and type of thing, you got to commit to 2 or 3 years here in Odessa, to do that, and with hopes that they'll put down roots in that time and stay.
I was wondering if that pattern was already laid in this budget item.
well, like I said, we don't have specific programs because there's a lot. I addressed it in my cover letter. I think we need to form a good group of stakeholders involved in this, including our higher ed, the school district, city, some major employers, obviously workforce, Permian Basin, and come together and go, what can we do as a community? What are the roles? And how can we, have an effective program to keep people here, get people here, have a skilled workforce towards what we're bringing here as far as business. So,
Excellent.
any other questions? Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Tom. Okay. That takes us to item 4, which would be current media.
We are kind of in the same situation. We've got a PowerPoint with just the basics that we can run through, or if you have specific questions, just let us know how you'd like to proceed with that.
Well, why don't you give us a broad overall general, and then
Start
we
with
can,
Okay,
delve
I'll do that.
into
Somebody
it.
else is loaded up. I don't want to mess them up, so. Basically, so the first part, to answer the original letter, is basically just saying, here's what we've done this year, here are some of our results. Our results are slim because we really didn't get started till February. So we've been working on building the tools. We just launched the website that you guys saw in June, so now all the tools are there. So now we're going to kind of tell you what we're going to do next with them. We actually got the new video finally this week. It's kind of blew me away. it's way better than I expected it to be. So that's always a nice, a nice thing. So we'll have a lot of other assets. We're making a few edits. I met with the economic development team. We went through it and we're making some edits to that, and then we'll have that ready to show. But that's really kind of the first part of the proposal, is just the updates. I'm going to flip down into the part where we go to the goals, if that's okay. And then we'll come back if y'all have any questions. Kind of listening to the board meetings, some of our advertising committee meetings the last couple of months, we put 4 goals out there. These are broad, no surprises here, but obviously new business recruitment to external product prospects, and then new business recruitment to local prospects. So that's always kind of been obviously the main goals. We did add workforce development in here, knowing that those conversations continue to happen. So from the marketing perspective, we want to just try to plug in and do whatever we can to support any efforts that come out of the board. The more tangible those are, like what you just mentioned, if there is a program, and I'm not, making one up, but if there's one that comes out where there's actually something tangible from UTPB or OC, those are always easier to market, right, than just we need people, please come. And then we kind of want to promote the ease of doing business in the city. I know that there are a lot of efforts underway, and as those things take place, we want to plug into that and talk about any streamlining, any changes, and things like that as well. So that being said, the one thing that's in the budget on key industries, we kind of took a step back, I would say in a couple of the advertising committee meetings a couple of months ago, to really talk about who we want to target. And so if we're going to go after anything really big, we know manufacturing. We know manufacturing is here. We know how to do it. We know that can apply to multiple industries, but we understand and know manufacturing. So that's where we are focusing right now. Anything beyond that, I've got some dollars in there to work with Golden Shovel, who did the website, to do a deeper dive on the target industries, but not the full plan. We talked with Tom's group and some others about how to do that. They can go in and basically, we can tell them, look, this is what we think we know. We don't need to do the research on a ton of things. Like, we already know a lot of what we have. We want you to take it from there and tell us what else we can do. So that you'll see in the budget as well, is to take that a little bit further.
I think part of that conversation we've had in advertising too has been, really looking at what our inputs can be in terms of natural resources, things like that, obviously oil and gas, those things, and where do those play into industries that we should have more, I know Christy and I were talking the other day about, it seems like we should be doing a lot more chemical here.
Mm-hmm.
We should be doing a lot more plastic here. We should be, because, the major input for those is petroleum based. There's also the realization that there's some things that we've got to stay away from, things that require heavy water input, because we don't have a lot of water as a natural resource. So those are the kinds of things that we're kind of using to narrow down that list of target industries, to just see where are we really strong, what industries fit that, versus where are we really weak and just we need to stay away from.
Well, and even as we were researching to do the proposal, a couple of the things that we found is, typically economic development groups have just gone after the target industries, but there are other things we could be missing if we just hone in on just 1 or 2 or 3, and so we don't want to miss the boat on some of the others. So I think taking what we know, applying it, taking the resources we have and applying those, and then reaching out to some of the experts who can tell us a little bit more about what we already know. And so that's in there. That may be one that we may not use. We may not need that. We may get to a point when we get some of these lists refined, we may not need to spend the money for an outside source to do that. But it is in the budget just in case.
And some of the things too for it in the budget, just to mention, is some of it would also cover looking at emerging industries that we may not even know that we should be looking at, that are currently looking at places, either in Texas or who have, similar resources and inputs that we have, that it might be a good opportunity to go for them. And then also looking at the state level, and some industries are incentivized more than others to come to Texas. And so there are some things, that's even something we found, when looking at, the gun manufacturers, that, a lot of them are actually not as incentivized as much in Texas as in other states. So even looking at where there's some opportunities where we can piggyback on what the state is already doing to incentivize, to bring them to Odessa versus somewhere else in Texas too.
So like oil.ai, we'll just put AI on the end of it.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, in general, just a couple of things. I mean, not to go too far down into the details, but we talked a lot in the last meetings about what we are going to do internally. We're working with Tracy and her group on more materials for the business retention expansion to kind of revitalize that. We have a lot of things still in the works that we haven't shown you guys yet in terms of collateral, or we actually have a big community profile that we're not planning to print, but will be digital. And so there are a lot of elements that we're still building that will work in both the internal and external market. One thing I kind of want to skip to, well, we're skipping around a little bit. I want to go to the digital part of our proposal, because that's really where a lot of the dollars are being spent, because they can be more finely targeted to these groups. So I'm going to skip to that and we can come back to some of the others, but I don't want to take away from those.
And so essentially, you'll see lots in here about data-driven and targeted. And so everything that we're looking at is a mixture of being very hyper-targeted, but also optimizing regularly. And so looking at it and saying, okay, what's working well and what isn't working well. And so everything we have in here is based upon being able to finally target the specific target industries we're looking at, decision makers, so people within those industries, and then looking at other resources that we have. For example, we have matched the NAICS codes. And so that is one thing that we have, is even looking at the local businesses for local business retention and expansion. We're able to target specific businesses that match within those NAICS codes.
And one thing on that list I was going to mention, Tracy's helping us look through that. You know, when you get those lists, Tom mentioned the list they're working on. A lot of times you get those back and you have businesses that have gone out of business that aren't there, so she's kind of helping us refine that. So it lists 746 names on there, that's going to come down a little bit.
Yeah.
But those are the matches to the handbook so far.
Yep.
Wow.
And so we'll be able to target based on NAICS codes matches. We can also target based on Dun and Bradstreet. So we can look at specific, industries, but then hyper target to the businesses within those industries, and then even key people within those industries. So we're able to do that on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is kind of unmatched in their ability for us to target not only businesses or industries, but also the job roles within it, and then to see insights from it. So from any LinkedIn campaigns we run, we will be able to then go in on the back end and go, okay, we know we had, X number of impressions, the basic kind of things we're used to seeing, impressions and clicks, but we're also going to be able to go in and see, okay, these are the industries that saw our ads, and these are the industries that engaged with them the most. These are the companies that saw our ads, and these are the companies that engaged with us the most. To where that's even providing prospects where they may have never filled out a form, but we can go back to the economic development group and say, hey, businesses X, Y, and Z are really interested in you. They're clicking on ads, they're engaging. So it's something we can see to report back to give them better leads as well. And then same with our targeted programmatic digital. And so really, really hyper targeting on specific businesses, industries, and even the key decision makers and gatekeepers within those industries. And then we have in here Facebook. This is something that, you wouldn't necessarily think of for industry targeting. That is for local. So that is not when we're targeting companies that will be moving here. Facebook is at the very top of the hierarchy for all of social media in Odessa. So anytime you're wanting to target someone local, whether that is us helping to spread the message of exactly what ODC is doing to the community, or if it's targeting businesses that are already here hoping to expand, that's a really good audience for it. Very strong in Odessa in particular.
And one thing that we're doing for the rest of this fiscal year, so now that the website's live, now that we have the videos, so starting this month, we are starting some of these campaigns. So we'll have a couple of months to take a look at, see how they're doing, make adjustments, so that by the time we get to fiscal year 2024, we have a little bit of information telling us what's working, what's not, and where we want to be placing those things. So I wanted to mention that as well. The other things that are in here, we've talked for 5 months about the website. So some of those things that are in there, the social media, where we're working with Lindsay, I think we have a ton of the assets and we have a pretty good system moving forward. I wanted to point out 2 things in the budget that we listed as contingencies. So one of them is PR. We have an ongoing PR just for us to help with everything that happens monthly, big announcements, things like that. But if you have a really big announcement that requires a huge PR push, we put that into the contingency part of the budget, just to kind of give you an idea of what we think we might need to spend in terms of manpower time, getting that out to local trades. And then the other thing that's in there, and there's a description on it, but with all of the talk about workforce, we are devoting some dollars to talking about workforce development. If there are, we did some testimonial videos a couple of weeks ago with Willie Taylor and OC and UTPB and talking to different people. And I think we have some good messages to put out there, but if we do have these stakeholder meetings and everybody kind of gets together and has more of a plan, we felt like there needed to be some dollars put forth to let people know about that. So that's why you see that separately. Just kind of, that is really spitballing a little bit, thinking, you know, what it would take to do that really, really well. That would probably change a little bit depending on what steps are taken next on the workforce development side. But just wanted to mention, that's kind of why they're separate. Need probably a few more details to really come up with a solid plan on those. That's the big overview, and the rest is in there if y'all have any questions.
So we've got a base budget of 586. With contingencies, we get to 748. Help me remember what we did this year.
So this year, we were at, right at 400 for ours, but that was January through, so that was reduced.
Placement, that was all billed out. I mean, the majority of that was billed out, getting the new website.
Most of it, we're actually gonna be under that this year, because we're just now starting media by the time we had those, and then the contract started just a little bit later. So we won't spend all of that 400 this year, just because I feel like we've got levels that are sufficient to do what we need it to do between now and the end of the year. So we're probably, but we did prorate that to where it was about 400, but that was also leaving off, 3 months.
3 months, okay.
So,
I'm betting you don't, and if not, I'll see if Seth can tell us maybe next meeting what we spent through CVA from September through January.
I'm not sure. I saw those in the beginning where we started, but I couldn't speak to
I
it.
had a
You got it?
question.
Okay,
So.
go ahead.
Your website, it's still in its infancy, I know, but I mean, I tried to pull it up and I run into a couple of glitches. And it
Okay.
seemed like it
Okay.
might be prioritizing one search engine, Bing or Google over DuckDuckGo. It wouldn't go, and I went out and went in different
And
through.
I'd like to
Chrome.
You were on
those.
DuckDuckGo?
And then one of the other pages that, from a search engine, there's a page called, Resourceful Spirit. Is that yours?
That's the old one. That's an
That's
old
old?
page.
But it still comes up.
It's coming up.
And it says, enter your contact. When you put it in, you click it, it's got a blank
And it was at
screen that says,
odessatext.com.
yeah,
Let
something
me,
needs to be killed out or something.
I'll go search for that and see. That has not been showing up for us because we went through every
Top
page,
three-
but,
The first three that popped up.
oh, when you do a Google search, that's
I
popping
just put
us.
ODC, Odessa, Texas.
Gotcha.
That's what,
Okay.
I did what a first grader would do.
Okay, and just did it that way.
And so three of them,
Look.
2 of them I had glitches and one of them went
So
through.
not on the actual website, but on the when you did the search.
Right.
Okay.
And Mary, did you say that was on DuckDuckGo, or were you on DuckDuckGo, or you were on Google? Do you know?
When it wouldn't go through, it's DuckDuckGo.
It was DuckDuckGo,
It went
okay.
through on straight Google.
Okay,
It
We'll
went
look at
through
the
on- No, it
indexing.
went through on Chrome, not Google.
Okay.
Because DuckDuckGo uses Google, but
Yeah.
Chrome's a little
Okay.
different.
okay.
We'll
So
see
I
if we
didn't know if
can't
it's
find that.
prioritizing or filtering it or something.
We'll have to
And
check.
it could be something where there's just a sitemap or index that needs to be pulled down from even the hosting site. That's something we'll look at. That should, I can't promise because search engines have a mind of their own,
Oh, I know they do.
but we'll do everything
We'll
we
figure
can
it
to
out.
control that.
They're
So
all always
go
trying
find
to
it.
rob each other.
they
Yeah.
are.
Yeah, thank you for letting us know, because we had not seen it, so we'll go check that out.
Any other questions for current media?
Okay, all right, thank you, guys.
Excellent, thank you. Okay. Black Chamber of Commerce, Dr. Walker. Look at there.
Evening to everyone. If you need to take a break, this is when to do it, because this will be so short and sweet, you'll miss it. We're not like the other big fine-tune organizations. We're mom and pop operations. We're basically, if you're a music lover, we're John Oates to their Daryl Hall. So we're the Supremes and they're Donna Ross. So we're just here to help. And I know that there in our proposal, we explained that we're conduit. We work, I'd proudly say that our relationship with the Odessa Chamber and the Hispanic Chamber is over and above what any of prior organizations were able to do. We have a very good working relationship. Renee and her group and Tom and their group has been very helpful. We basically, any questions, because all we do is basically, we're a support group. We're here to help where we can. We fill in where we can. We don't have the manpower. We don't have the deep numbers or the deep pockets, but we're able to assist where we can and when we can. So we try to do, as a matter of fact, we're to the point that we're able to do a little bit more for some of the organizations here in town. We're able to do a little bit more in the Permian Basin. We have some members that has come on board outside of the area because we carry Permian Basin in our name. So we were asked as far as our scholarships, which does not pertain to this proposal. They say, if you are the Permian Basin, why are not people in Andrews, Pecos, in the Permian Basin not eligible for the scholarships? So we opened our scholarships up to the Permian Basin this year, and we received a lot of interest. So we, as a matter of fact, we're working with a young lady in Alpine on an event that she is getting ready to have. Basically, what information would you like to know? Because I know what we do, we're small, but a lot of times I tell people, come by to see what we offer. We have good coffee, it's free, I get it from Renee and their group, so they keep good coffee. So if you come up and you want to visit and sit down, we always have good coffee. So any questions that you may want to ask, okay, what is the purpose? Why are we here? Why the Black Chamber? We're there to assist. If someone is to the point that they're intimidated or they're not able to get in touch with the Odessa Chamber, we run interference. We're that partnership to the point that we get them to the right person. As a matter of fact, a young lady just had a meeting, a counseling session, has a great business. She has a great business proposal. It is, she presented it, but she had no clue how to go about it. So I'm going to get with Tyler. I told her that this is the route she needed to go. This is what we're getting now. A lot of people are not they're to the point that they're comfortable with talking to us now. They're bringing their ideas to us, thank God, and we're finally getting those. As a matter of fact, we got a request today and asked us, could we come and build a wheelchair ramp at their house? And I told them, no, that is not the Black Chamber. But we can direct you to someone that can build a wheelchair ramp. So
you're requesting $50,000 this year. What's the total Black Chamber budget in total?
Our total budget for the year, you're looking at stretching it probably 75, 80,000.
So 25,000 comes from memberships,
Yes,
that kind of stuff.
yes, sponsorship.
50,000 from ODC.
Yes, the generosity of the ODC, yes.
Questions?
Come on now, I was prepared for more questions, please.
How many members does the Black Chamber have?
Oh, my goodness. As a matter of fact, we have been doing a records cleaning as well. We have gone through, we had somewhere in the neighborhood on record at right below 440. And once we got through with the active, actual paying members, we were down to 226. So we've been going through our system and we've been basically kind of, and the same thing as everybody else. Companies are out of business. Contact person has changed.
Didn't pay their dues.
Sir?
Didn't pay their dues.
Well, I didn't want to say that. Yeah. They just decided that the money didn't stretch as far this year. So.
Excellent. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, sir.
Well, no, thank you. That you kept me from having to stay out there in the heat working in the yard, so I'm good. Y'all have a good one.
Thank you. All right. University of Texas, the Permian Basin Small Business Development Center, Mr. Tyler Patton.
Thank you. It's good to be with you again. I just wanted to kind of recap the last year real quickly and kind of give you the basis for our request. It's no different than it was last year, but your support in the last year helped us basically work with more than 490 clients for 2,400 consulting hours. We played a role, in most cases a significant role, in starting 41 new businesses that generated 202 new FTEs. Our clients retained more than 2,400 FTEs. That's a big number for SBA. They like to look at that number. That means clients, we meet with some clients who are starting a business and they may start with one or two, but then we also have a client base who are already in business and have 15, 20 employees, et cetera. So that's how they account for that, basically. So that's the number there. These companies were able to secure a little over $15.5 million in capitalization last year. Some of that is SBA funds, some of that is non-SBA loans, some of it is investors, things like that. So it's coming from a more variety of sources, frankly, than it has in the past. Conventional loans are making up a bigger percentage than what it has in the past. Of these new businesses, 56% of them were from owners from underserved communities. And about, okay, that's the number I was wanting to talk about. Now, what's not in here, I just wanted to give you kind of an update. In June, well, April through June, our number of clients actually doubled in terms of year over year, clients we saw, okay? So new clients were up by 50%. So in spite of the fact that, well, everybody knows what's going on with interest rates right now. Nothing attractive about them at all in terms of getting loans. But the interest in starting businesses, expanding businesses, things like that is still there. So it's still happening. Yes, we are requesting basically the same amount of money as last year. 100% of that goes to salary to 2 consultants and 1 coordinator. The consultants both work one-on-one with businesses. They also present workshops, as well as the coordinator, who does a little bit of everything. She keeps us in compliance with the SBA, but also does all the reports and works with clients one-on-one to get them registered and all the things that have to happen. So, any questions? All right. Thank you again. I would like to tell you, because of your support, our SBDC was actually won the award for the best SBDC in the Northwest Texas region. So we are the 2023 winner of that award. Got to be blunt, the trophy is atrocious looking. It is ugly, but we're proud of it. It's like having a baby. It's ugly, but boy, we're proud of it. So anyway, again, that's thanks to your support. We couldn't do it without y'all.
Well done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Motran, Mr. Beecham.
We've got a little update since our previous submission based on our UTP performance for this year, so we'll let you get that around. You've got our budget submission. It's the same, I believe, as it has been for the last 4 years. I think it's pretty much unchanged, at least the portion to you. We did revise that budget up a little bit for next year, and that's based on some funding that we're getting from a private source this year, and then part of that we're carrying over into reserves for next year, just because of the timing of it. As a note to you on our budget, it works out to roughly a third of our budget comes from ODC, roughly a third of it comes from MDC, and roughly a third of it is private. And we'll come back to that if you have any questions on it. But again, nothing, essentially the same budget for the last 4 years. I've been here for 20 years now, and every day I do pretty much the same thing. I start off looking at this graph that was part of a report that we did 20 years ago that showed us at the bottom of the funding barrel for the Odessa area. And so our goal has been simple during that time. I mean, there are general development plans and everybody's got their deal, but ours was just to get more, better, and faster, to put it very simply. And in this UTP cycle, I think there's been kind of the ultimate culmination of that. If you look at formula funding, and we don't always look a lot at formula funding, a lot of times what we're talking about is individual funding on projects and things like that above and beyond the normal. But if you want to look at a long-term solution to our issues out here, that was part of it, particularly if you're going back to that original 2003 report. And what you will see is our area dominates the rest of the state in formula funding categories in this go-round. And there's about 3 things that go into that. One is about 10 years ago, we realized our local data was bad and had not been updated in 13 years. We got a grant from $870,000 from the Texas Department of Transportation to beef that up. We got fought by the local MPO on that. Didn't want to do it. Finally, they relented and did. And that began the cycle of about $5 million more in program funding every year, which is good because that's every year after year after year. So that's a part of it. The second part was the freight study through TxDOT. That raised that number about $10 million a year. And most recently, one of the things that we had worked on was when we worked to get Tryon-Lewis on the Transportation Commission, the state passed Proposition 7, which takes a portion of those oil and gas severance taxes, of which about 70% comes from out here, and puts that towards transportation. But one of the things that we came to was an agreement in his services chair that we would create a category 11E, which is discretionary district funding, category 11, but we would create a subcategory 11E under that, that if there was a great amount of that severance, that money would funnel back to those areas where it was from. And what I will tell you is in this year's UTP, that's going to result in $1.1 billion of additional funding for the TxDOT Odessa district. So that's a pretty significant thing. And that's been part of that. The next part goes back to discretionary funding, that year-by-year basis or project basis. This year, $974 million additional dollars for the Odessa district in this UTP cycle. Of that, 639 is specifically for the Odessa district. And I will tell you, there's a couple of things that have been very helpful there. One of them, it pains me to say it as much as I hate watching people walking around with their damn phone, but social media. A couple years back, we used a little bit of your funding because we weren't fully staffed at that point, to contract out with Christie and Current Media Partners to do a social media campaign. And originally, it started with Southwest Airlines. You're familiar with that part of it. It was very effective there. But there were 2,000 people in that corporate headquarters. And there's one of me, and I'm fat and I'm lazy. And who do you talk to in there? And they don't want to talk. Not all those people want to talk to me either, by the way. I'm well aware of that. But it allowed us to begin transmitting information that was absolutely critical. And then the conversations that we did have were far more effective. The same thing is true with TxDOT. There's 13,000 employees at TxDOT, and I realize not all of them are decision makers. But in the UTP process, there's probably about 150 people involved in that. And so this has been a very effective tool. And again, your participation has allowed that. The other thing that's been very helpful in this has been leveraging of projects. That has been a big part of this. There are none of those projects on this list this year, but it's been a big part of it getting to this point. And so I say that from the perspective that our relationship with you is a partnership. You have been a generous partner for a long time, but there are tremendous dividends to that. And at this point this year, with the passage of this UTP, it'll be roughly about $5.4 billion above and beyond what we were projected to get previously. So our success is in fact your success. I will tell you that process is already starting again with the new UTP cycle for next year. And one of the things that we're working on right now is the Loop 338 expansion to a freeway design with access roads and all of that from 191 up to Yukon. And that'll be part of a bigger project. That's the environmental process going forward. But we're very optimistic that that project will move along. We'll get a lot of additional funding there. That's probably going to be about $200 million to build that out, would be my guess. But again, to have those projects ready to go for the next cycle and for the next go-round. Finally, the last page of what I handed to you is a couple maps of the Midland and Odessa area with a breakout of interstates, I-20, I-10, I-14, I-27, things you've heard a little bit about. And it kind of goes back to the whole point of why we do this and why we come and ask for your help here from an ODC perspective. If you look at those corridors and those connections back to the Midland and Odessa area vis-a-vis interstate highways, this has been our long-term goal over those 20 years, is to have over 80% of this state's population, over 80% of its economic impact, and 80% of its workforce tied back here to the Permian Basin. That way, if something bad happens and they outlaw oil and gas tomorrow and we can only drive a Tesla, whatever it might be, that there would be an infrastructure in place here that would sustain those other things that could come after. Hopefully that's not the case. I don't want to ride a bicycle and I don't have a charging station. So, but again, going back to that point of making sure that you have a great business environment here with the infrastructure necessary to support a lot of things, regardless of what that's going to be and what you're going to target. With that being said, I would shut up other than to say thank you and answer any questions that you might
I have a
have.
question.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned the 338 project, and of course, there's 3 overpasses going to be built in rows. How do they prioritize Grandview or 87th or 100th? I mean, they can't cripple them all at once.
Well, and JBS too. They'll
And
have to do that.
GBS, yeah, 4.
Well, what you would do is you would prioritize by cross-traffic, by need. But I really think in this, we may, based on what's happening on the interstate, I'm a little hesitant to say
And it's
this,
gonna
but
be
we're
top
getting smarter.
freeway all the way around to 385.
Yeah, and I think what may happen if they're really smart, so we've grouped a lot of the projects on the interstate where really big things, and hopefully that attracts other people to come in and bid on it rather than just the same old, and it provides them some efficiencies. Well, one of the things, if we could group some of those overpasses, you know, the primary expense in an overpass is concrete, plain and simple. And if you could group those projects and a contractor could come in and batch plat that out there on site, they could save a hellacious amount of money, which is good for them and good for us, and frankly would make things go a lot faster. And so I think that's kind of where we're heading at that, but again, your prioritization of that's going to be based on some traffic patterns and then also, again, look at that cross-traffic. But it's all pretty significant. 100th would probably be the last in that just because there's not an intersection there today. But I would think probably based on the traffic counts that you see currently, you'd probably work your way from.
Well, I expect 100th to be cut through before anything else to the north, so.
Yeah, we'll have to see kind of what the city's timeline on that is, so I'm not sure, but
Thank you.
no problem.
Any other questions for Mr. Beecham?
Thank y'all.
Thank you, James.
Thank you.
Okay. City of Odessa Administrative Support, Mr. Bowles.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good morning.
My little speech here won't be as flashy as everyone else. Mine's just by the numbers. So on your desks there in front of you, you'll have a copy of the administrative contractor agreement. This is just the normal agreement for the city to provide administrative services to ODC for such economic development purposes and the funds for such proposals that have been appropriated for the fiscal year 24 year. I do want to bring just a few things to get to the forefront here. If we go to page 2 of that agreement, under economic development sales tax, ODC's obligation to fund the services required herein shall be paid solely from the economic development sales tax and shall not be a charge on any other fund or require the levy of a tax. We're keeping the same monthly payment that we've always had as our admin fee. That comes out to a total cost of $205,349. Be $17,112.42 per month. On the next page, on page 3, under budget and financial reporting, we have no changes on our reporting requirements. The city shall prepare and submit in writing and present to the board a monthly report showing accounting of all funds received and expended under this agreement during the preceding month. Said report shall also show the cumulative expenses and revenues for the preceding month together with all the prior months of this agreement. And the city shall maintain complete and accurate financial records for each expenditure of program funds made. I believe the only other things I'd like to bring to your attention is on the Exhibit A, the very second to last page. We've got, between this page and this last page, 2 highlighted items under legal services provided by the city attorney's office. We have it still showing prepare ODC agenda with direction from the ODC board. And then under administrative services provided by the city secretary's office is work with the city attorney's office on the ODC agenda as needed. If that has, I know that has changed with the chamber handling the agenda now. We want to change that for this agreement as well, so.
I would think we could probably, aside from the city secretary still having to post the agenda.
Well, I think we still need legal though, too, because I know kind of what's been happening, I think, is Tom and his guys have been preparing the agenda, and then it kind of gets reviewed by Dan's office, to make sure we've dotted our i's and crossed our t's and done all those things, and then Norma still does the posting and make sure we comply with all that. So I don't know that really changes. I mean, we probably have jiggled it a little bit, but I still think those are things that probably still need to continue to be in there.
And that's perfectly fine. I just didn't
We
know if the
may need to
wording.
work on the wording a little bit,
Okay.
but.
Yeah,
That's still
it says prepare ODC agenda and it could say review
View,
ODC.
yeah.
So that's a pretty simple change. And then the other item, under Norma's, it says as needed. I think that takes care of that part of it, so.
Okay.
Work with the city attorney's office on ODC agenda as needed. I mean, I think that's probably just fine.
And if, under the city secretary, with that second bullet point, if we can include the chamber, work with the chamber.
Yeah, or the economic development office.
Economic development.
Or both. Both the city attorney's office and the economic development department.
Yes.
Other than that, does anyone have any questions on administrative support? Okay. Thank you.
Any questions as far as the budget or anything, as far as administrative support? Seemed pretty cut and dry.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Mr. Crowe, would you like me to come back up under number 10 to discuss the budget that's in front of you? Or do you want me to go ahead and go through that?
Yeah, look, would it,
I know that you may have to, with the rules, so.
You're gonna have to suspend the rules. If we're gonna, are we talking about him going down to number?
Yeah, jump into 10 and then come back to
You're
9.
gonna need to make a motion to suspend the rules and him stand there.
Or we could talk about the general development plan now. What would you guys rather do? We're talking about taking it out of order.
I don't
Yeah,
care.
I mean, just,
I'm more than
I'll make a
happy to
motion
come back up. I
suspend.
heard y'all ask about the budget, so.
Good
I'll make a
question.
motion to suspend the rules so that we can take these out of order.
Okay, have a motion?
Second.
Have a second from Ms. Holman. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay,
rules are suspended.
rules are suspended, so we'll go ahead and move on then to item 10. Thank you, Dan. Discuss and consider contracts, budgets, operations, et cetera. And so, budgets it is.
All right, well, thank you, Board. What you have there in front of you is the prepared preliminary proposed budget for ODC. In the column under fiscal year 23-24, you'll see the amount that's budgeted for sales tax revenue. We're only budgeting right now conservatively a $500,000 increase. As of right now, the number, if you go to your second page, we do not have that August balance yet, but I should have that by this time next week when the proposed budget will be brought for approval. We are receiving over our prior year budget right now for sales tax. We've had a really good year there. We expect that to happen, but we do want to budget conservatively with that number as well.
And what do you forecast it to be at the end of the year?
Forecasting wise, it should be, it's almost close to the 12 million that I have budgeted right now
Already,
already.
and it's not, we're not complete?
Is the 11,037,000, is that January through today, or is that September? through
That is not,
October?
that was as of August 22 right now.
So through-
That, right, there's the yellow highlight right there next to it, Mr. Crowe, that needs to be updated as soon as those numbers come in, and those will come in the first of next week.
That's October through August, right?
Yes, sir.
But that's, is that 22 or 23?
That's 22's number still
We
from,
don't have 12.
Okay.
we do not have, I should have 23 numbers next week.
Ballpark?
It's close to that already again, or a little bit, probably, it's probably almost to 12 million already.
I think it'd be more than that.
It may be, Mr. Crowe.
A lot of months, we're running like almost 1.5, aren't we? So, I'll have to go back and look. I was thinking we were trailing really closer to like 15 million.
I think right now it's setting at about this amount, the 11 million, but the 15 million is correct because it just hasn't been recorded yet on the city side, so.
Gotcha. So it'd be missing August, September.
August and September, and I will have those next week as well.
Okay. So, I understand being conservative.
Hey, Seth, go down to business incentives. I'm a little confused in the
Yes.
22-23 budget. We got $58 million there, and then in the proposed budget, we got,
There's nothing there right now because that is based on our discussion today. We decide what that number will be for this next fiscal year, along with the infrastructure grants as
It's
well.
typically a plug number that says we're gonna spend everything in incentives, so that we don't have to come back with a budget amendment. That's, so.
On that
that-
set-
That number.
so that's
that-
basically our max that we could possibly spend.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
That makes sense.
Okay.
If you go
depends-
to,
So it depends on all these other numbers up here.
Mr. Russell, if you go to number 13 on my second page, I've got a note there that's subject to change. The numbers that have the yellow highlights above them, those will still need to be updated based on activity that comes in all the way up to next week before the
Well,
meeting
see, that's
starts.
the mistake you made, Seth, expecting us to read the instructions.
I apologize. I know my method to the madness. I apologize. So. Other than on the expenditure side,
So let me ask you a question real quick
Yes, sir.
there, and then we typically, what do we have currently allocated in business and, do you have the number of,
It's right here on your second page.
is it
Is
here
that
somewhere?
36.3?
In this green box.
Yeah, 36,000,000,
Okay, got it,
396
okay.
Yes,
It's got the total that's committed and then what we expect to be paid.
in 23.
Okay, so we got
23.
36 out committed. About 18 million of that is Nacero, I think, right? Because
Should
we
be.
made 20, yeah, and we paid
Should
2.
be.
so.
and that assigned number for TxDOT and the workforce housing infrastructure incentives did not change. That number will be a set number, the same for this next budget.
And the workforce housing used to be larger, but we removed most of that, other than what we knew we would need to potentially pay out.
Found out what was still out there.
Any questions on the revenue before I go down to the expenditures? Okay. The only increase that we're planning on is for the audit and compliance services. This is just based on inflation. That's about a 5% increase over the $60,000 budget. Right now, we came in at about 67 for the current year. 67,000 is where we're sitting actually right now. Bank services, of course, our admin fee there under City of Odessa, the 205,349 stay the same. I left the contingencies account. That funding was moved out of facade grants back in the 2023 budget to cover for any type of contingencies that may happen or any new projects outside of the threshold of our contracted agreements as well as incentives or infrastructure grants. And under,
Seth,
Yes.
the contingencies number to be, in order for that money to be spent, this board would have to agree to spend it,
yes, sir.
right? It's budgeted, but that doesn't mean
It does need to
wouldn't be
come-
spent without this board agreeing to spend it,
Yes, sir.
okay?
The insurance number is the same. I have received and I will be presenting it next week, basically the next premium agreement. It did not change with your premium payment for the year. I will bring that to the board next week. Under the contracted economic development services, the amounts that you see for all of our contractors are the amounts pulled from their RFPs. And once we get down to the business incentives and infrastructure, once we know how the board wants to allocate the contractor RFPs, then I can get a number together for the proposed amount that will be presented at the next meeting next week for approval.
One item that doesn't look like it got moved over was the infrastructure grants. There's nothing in there in that line?
Yes, sir, and that's the one that will come with the incentives amount as well.
Because it's a percentage. Correct?
Uh,
Isn't that
yes,
determined
ma'am.
on a percentage basis?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. The facade amount is set at 150,000. Business incentives and infrastructure grants is a number that will come once the board preliminarily approves these numbers that are here now.
I didn't remember that.
That's why your revenues over under is, you've got a positive 9.2 right now. We just don't have those line items in there just yet. So that number is going to change, of course.
Interesting. You know, we only spent 68,000 roughly in 18, 68,000 in 19, nothing in 2021, nothing in 21, 22. But yeah, we'll be budgeting for 275 roughly, all things being equal.
And I think it's tied in with what grants have already been kind of
There were a
forethought.
couple big ones in there.
Okay.
So those are expected to be paid out, but they may not have met the threshold yet to be paid out, of course, by board approval, of course. But, so those are kind of rolling numbers at the same time as well.
Okay. Questions? Suggestions?
It'll be a lot cleaner next week when it's the proposed one. But just I wanted it, you guys to actually see it now, so you know it was being worked on.
Okay,
Any questions for me?
not at this second.
Okay. Door's always open.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
So, for time and that type of thing, I know this one's not quite on the can, but one of the reasons we had 10 in here was so that we could discuss and approve or disapprove any of these today. Do we want to go kind of reverse back kind of through these? Seth, on the city, I think, is there any reason we can't? Well, I mean, it's not ready. We may need to put that one off to approve till next week, when we have the final numbers.
I think that's when we actually approve the budget is next week, because we'll have the final numbers, but this
Okay.
is our opportunity to, I guess I've done more of these than, this is our opportunity to discuss what the contractors are proposing, how the budget's set out, if there's anything we wanna change about how we've historically done these. We've always had it in this, I'm glad that the city does it this way, we have our little color-coded explanations for what's gone up and what's gone down, and where these numbers all come from. And so if there's questions about it,
Yeah, this
or
big deal.
discussion of it, and then, once we have the final numbers next week, it'll be just a matter of voting on the budget.
Okay, so let's wait on the budget.
But we can, now'd be the time to suggest changes if you want to change
Yeah,
it.
if-
Right.
If you're
one of the-
comfortable.
If you're happy with what the contractors are proposing,
Then-
then great.
Then that signals that, that's what will be presented next week.
Well, if
Well,
we,
then, let's talk about the city administrative support proposal then, more so than the overall budget, because that'll, all of that'll kind of come into this. Any changes to city services budget we want to talk about? I think that goes to, everything they provide, the room, the Norma, the
I know
Dan.
that this is, I do wish, I always wish, and we don't, I always wish we got the type of breakdown on man hours and that kind of thing from the city that we get from some of our other contractors. I know we've asked for that over the
point.
years, multiple times, and it's just not something that is easy for them to provide. Because our tracking is difficult
Right.
with all the overlap between ODC and the city.
Because,
I mean, I don't know that moving the preparation of the initial draft of the agenda is such a big task that it would shift the dollars for the city any. I can't imagine, so.
we pay $17,300 a month to the city for the services they provide.
Yeah, that includes the use of this room, the website, they stream our meetings, so.
It's the same number we had in 18-19.
I don't think it's changed since I
So-
think it goes back
It
further than that,
changed,
because
the
I think it's about
last
the
time
same
it
number I remember.
changed was, I remember,
It went down in
it
18-19.
went up from, I believe, in the 2017 area, because I just had Nolan, and it was the first time that I sat it through one of these budget workshops, and it went from like 11,000 to the 17 then.
Well, it shows here it was 229 in 17-18 and then 205 in the next year, so it actually went down.
So I think my first go-around, I remember it being right around or just over 200,000 then, which was back when Moby Dick was a little bit of minnow, so. It's there. I mean, if we,
I don't have a problem with it.
I mean,
I'm fine with it.
I don't
mean,
know
think-
exactly where the 205, 349, comes from, how they got to that specific number, but.
Probably, yeah, I don't know how they did the math to come up with it, but once upon a time, supposedly somebody did.
Yeah. Okay. Any-
Now, the one question I would have about it is that includes our legal services, which we continue to use.
Yes.
But the question is, are we using them less now that we work with Jeff, or is it about the same, and does that change the cost?
That's a question for Mr. Jones.
Has it taken any of the burden off of city legal for us to be working with Jeff? Or are we calling you saying, call Jeff and ask blah, blah, blah?
Yeah, usually
Yeah.
that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
But his fees would be in this number, right?
Yeah, they would be.
It's still gonna come
Is it
through this
still within the
205, 349.
There's nothing additional that the city gets paid for the city attorney's office doing any of this work, other than.
So our
But our
bills
bill
to
to
Jeff
Jeff
are
would be
separate
separate.
from the
Separate,
city
yes.
Yeah.
bills,
Which that is
the
one
city
thing.
services.
So
Do we need to budget something for?
Do we have anything
Do we have
in
anything
here for
budgeted for
legal?
Jeff Moore here for,
I don't
for,
think
for what
I
we'd
don't
say
think there's
outside legal?
anything for outside legal.
We need to put something there.
Is that contingencies?
Could be at this second, but since we're doing this, we probably need to add a number.
It wouldn't
Add a
be a
line
bad
item
idea.
for outside legal.
Outside legal, because that will not fall within what we're paying the
Not
city.
within what you're paying the city.
But I would say that we were using the city's legal staff for that work that he's going to do for us before. So,
Presumably, it would
so if you
reduce
budget
the-
something, you're gonna have to carve it out of this.
Well, that goes back to Melanie's question though, of really and truly, is the city spending less time? Don't know that they really are, because what we typically end up doing, because this, well, and the question is for
And
us.
I think it's early days too, so it's
Yeah.
really hard to.
So, because the city will still have to review our stuff, but the city is technically not reviewing it for us as much as it's reviewing it for city council. Because, even though Jeff produces a
Yeah, but
contract
that's
for
city
us.
council's financial obligation, not
So then does
ours.
it come back to David's question of, do we need to carve that out of this number?
So Tina's telling me not yet. We're not to that point where we're actually,
Offloading it.
It's running as smooth as we would like.
It's a
so-
process of moving those
I mean,
responsibilities over.
I would kind of make a suggestion that we do two things. One, we put some outside legal in our budget so that we have it. And then at the same time, ask in particular legal to kind of for the next 6 months, kind of track.
Yeah. We can
Now,
do
we
that.
don't have to get down to
You're
minute
gonna
by
do
minute.
what I do.
minute-
Billable hours, yeah,
That's
Yeah.
right, if you
Yeah.
track your hours, then we
Yeah.
can tell
just like old times.
that some of y'all never had to do that, it's the worst part of the job.
Did that when I was out on my own.
That way
So,
we would at least get a sense of,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe, can we do the city services portion? Can we budget for that? For like a 6-month period and then revisit it at the end of 6 months to see if
We can
And
always
if-
do budget amendments.
if our outlays to Jeff Moore, $2,000 a month, then the ideal scenario is that we're $2,000 less dependent on the city.
Right.
And instead of paying $17,000 a month, we're paying them $15,000,
Well, then, I.
which is what David is saying.
Yeah, I don't, what I would question is, would anybody be surprised if this city of Odessa $205,000 number is going to be larger because you're gonna add back the services for Jeff Moore? To me, I don't know that we anticipated that our cost was gonna go up. I mean, we never talked about that.
True.
We did talk about utilizing services. We thought that would be a good way to accomplish the task and everything. But I don't know that anybody was sitting here on this board was anticipating that number going up.
I
Now,
mean, to the city,
I'm talking about if you take the city of Odessa, $205,000 number has legal cost in it.
Yes,
The
it
city
does.
legal cost. Now we started outsourcing a portion of that. Did you anticipate that this cost would remain static and that you're gonna pay an additional amount to Jeff Moore? I don't know that anybody
mean,
did.
It's not
I
something we
think
talked
that
about.
our thought was that the obligations to the city would go down.
Yeah, that's my point.
We just don't know how much yet,
Yeah.
or how
Well,
fast.
it's been static for 3 or 4 years.
I would suggest budgeting this number and then come back if we need to come back and do a budget amendment. I think that would be a good way to do it, because the only way we'd do a budget amendment is if it was presented to us and we agreed with it.
Should we
And
say
then-
how many months in the future we want to look at that and see what kind of amendment we
Yeah.
can make?
Midpoint, yeah.
Because
Yeah,
then we
midpoint
have
be
some
great.
time.
Midpoint would be
Have a
great.
little history.
So I think that would be good.
And then if we did a budget amendment, then I think you'd do a formal budget amendment that said, we're gonna have a line item that's gonna be outside legal
Outside
services.
legal.
And then this number's gonna be adjusted.
We'd want to see, the problem with having city legal track their hours now is that they weren't tracking their hours before, so
Yeah.
we don't know what the delta is.
Yeah.
We can,
And then how are you paying out Jeff Moore's bills out of what?
Right now, I
Yeah,
believe they're,
What general ledger account basically?
I believe it's that special services account that's zero budgeted right now.
So
But it has been very immaterial that's come in right now. I still think it's below $2,000, to be honest. But that's what I would recommend you probably re-budget for that line item. Put in an amount that you guys think is applicable for that. That's where you would want to stick it. You wouldn't want to stick it in your contingencies, because then every time he has an invoice, you got to approve it here in
Yeah.
front of the board.
Okay, so I'm gonna lean on you and Dan a little bit on this as far as, let's just talk about Jeff Moore for just a second. You know, I know it's been very little, he has been very reasonable on cost. That's one of the reasons we used him, and he's been fabulous. What would you suggest we budget monthly
monthly,
for Jeff Moore?
I mean, I think
You know,
his
some months will be more than
hourly
others.
rate is is it 250 or 200?
It's 250.
250? I mean, budget 2,500 a month, and some months we might be high and some months we might be low, but once we have some history,
So
we'll have a better idea how to budget for that.
30 grand for the year.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have a higher bill coming out of July, cause he did several
There may
contracts
be
for us.
some big
So-
projects coming where
Yeah.
we should expect a larger bill.
Anybody have a problem with budgeting 2,500 a month for our outside legal,
mean,
which I
that
guess you'll do
sounds
under special
very,
services?
very inexpensive.
Yes, sir?
I don't have a problem with it,
That might be
but
too
I would
low.
recommend lowering this 205 number by the same amount. Because that's what the expectation is, that instead of doing that in-house, we're doing it outside.
Mr. Boutin, also, this also includes internal staffing for finance department and the
Yeah.
city manager's office
Yeah.
too,
Right.
so.
Right, right.
That, just so you're aware, and it all takes place with an interfund transfer between city finances and ODC finances.
Okay.
So there's no payment technically, it's all done by journal entry every month.
Well, I think I'd rather the city come back to us and cry uncle, you know, to say, hey, you didn't budget enough for
The
this.
problem is they're not gonna know. I mean, that's the problem I've always had with this issue, is that we don't receive an invoice from the city for the hours that they spend on ODC that we then pay and can assign an hourly value to.
And I would agree with that.
They've just come up with this number, and they can't, when I say they, obviously, I mean, they came up with it years and years ago.
That this number's
And-
an admin
Okay,
fee.
let me ask it this way. Would everybody be comfortable spending $235,000 for City of Odessa and special services? Because now that number's gone, their budget's gone up by $30,000. Are we happy with that?
My general unhappiness stems from never having any kind of
Breakdown.
Yeah,
of real understanding of the value. I know we get value out of the city,
Right, and there's no question of that.
absolutely.
But I
What is
agree
that
with
value?
you, Melanie, wholeheartedly, you know, which is one of the other things that we've talked about. I mean, it's, you know, I think every expense we had should have an invoice that goes along with it for transparency.
They're not gonna, I mean, that increases their administrative burden. They're not set up to bill like that. That's just not. We've had this fight so many times. Maybe you'll have better luck with it than I have over the years.
I'm good at that part.
Seth?
That's,
I
but that's
believe-
the question is this, you know, what do we want to
I
do?
believe it's because it's ODC's a component unit of the city. That's why that type of burden doesn't happen with an invoice situation.
But
Seth,
can y'all give us a list of who in the city works on ODC projects and what percentage of their time is spent on it?
I think they're here in the room right now.
Yeah.
We're looking at us,
Because-
the three of us, or
Yeah.
four of us here.
And there's nobody else.
This one right here.
what percentage, Tina? Tina, what percentage?
Ronald's looking at it as an opportunity to evacuate.
That's about the reaction we've always gotten.
Yeah, I think Seth, if we could get even a rough approximation of just how much time.
I was going to recommend maybe just tracking our hours internally by these subdivisions within the city. Legal can do that, finance can do that, city manager's office can do that, if possible. You know, just to
from
see,
there,
and it may be rough this year because that's a hard task. It's the same with the city secretary's office.
Norma, you're
But-
so sensuous. You know, sensuous not doing anything else. Could you go and start tracking your time?
Well, the same goes for me too, so, I mean, you know.
That can be done. Seth, do you know
Just a matter of doing it.
how they came up with the 209, 205,
It's been,
17,000 a year?
it's been here longer than I've been employed for the city,
Yeah.
so.
Larry Long came up with it.
And I'm like, it makes no sense how it was.
We could probably, Norma, go back and pull the minutes from the fights about it. I don't know. But
Well, again, I keep coming back to when we hired outside legal,
yeah,
did we expect our overall cost to go up?
I think
I-
we expected that the city's responsibilities would go down, which would necessitate the payment to the city going down.
Right.
And I think that, like you said, I think that when we looked into this, this was gonna look like, it was looking like it was gonna be an extra expense over what the city was already doing, because the city does a certain amount of legal anyway. And having
Yeah,
him
but this takes
look
a
at this as
huge
well.
amount off their desk. They don't
Sure.
have to do they do have to present the contracts to council,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not something ODC should,
And I understand David's point of lowering that somewhat to not,
to offset.
but I also think when we were looking at Mr. Moore, look at this option was gonna be, this is gonna be a little bit more expense that we're willing to pay to have some outside look at these things. And I was thinking it was something we're willing to pay, however, the city can also help out with that.
And I didn't anticipate there was gonna be additional cost.
I would say it then, really and
But
truly.
that's
then-
just me.
Then how about we look at it as, we drop that 205, and I'm rounding, down to, what, 175? And then we plug 30,000 into special services for outside legal? And then, as David said, because.
And then just come back to us and
We've got
say,
a new
hey,
city
this
manager
isn't
coming
working.
in the next week or so, and I'm sure he'll be reviewing all of this and then come back to us.
I think that works for me. I mean, if the city has a way to quantify
It would help.
the value they provide to ODC and can justify whatever number, that's a different matter than,
Okay,
I'm good with that.
more discussion? Everybody else good with that? Okay.
Sound good? All right,
Got that?
thank you.
So, on that, because part of this is, right now is the city services, can we go ahead and vote to approve it with the city services to that? We're not approving the whole budget, just the city services.
subject to that change.
Contract.
of the- We're not approving the budget yet.
Correct.
But if you're gonna do it, you need to do them line item.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna go back
Yes.
the way we
One at a
came,
time,
one at
since
a
we
time.
suspended the rules.
Yes, sir. I'm gonna go back through it the way we did.
that's
So with that, this one being the first one would be the city administrative support proposal. So we're gonna increase that total amount by $30,000. So we'd actually end up at, well, 205. It would actually be the same number. I'm sorry. We're not increasing the total. Thank you, David. We'd still be at 205,000. Can I get a motion to approve the 205,000 budgeted expenses for city services?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Have a motion from Mr. Robinson, have a
I
second
thought we were
from.
going to budget for the outside legal separate from the city services.
It's in.
Yes, I have it written down that you're going to budget on special services 30,000 and then
Yeah.
the 205,
I think that's what he said.
349
Yeah, no,
less
that-
the
no,
30,000.
You're correct, and I had that wrong, because we've got city services as a different line item here. Yeah, thank you
Yeah.
for correcting me on that. So let's do 175,000. Would you guys amend your motion to 175,000 for city services?
City of Odessa,
City of Odessa.
That line item? Okay, so I have a motion from Mr. Robinson, I have a second from Dr. Kurt. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion carries. Now, for special services, which will be our outside legal, adding a $30,000 budget item for that.
So moved.
Second.
second.
I have a motion from
Jeff.
Jeff, and I have a second, I think, from Mickey and Melanie. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, excellent.
Now, just because I have to look out for, you know, the lawyer, if we have a bill that comes in excess of the budget, we've got the contingencies line item that we can pay him
Yes. Yeah, and it goes
without
with all
having
of them.
to amend at that point.
Yes, ma'am. Good point. Okay, so let's back up one more. Motran, James Beecham's budget. And I had a total of, is it 142.5?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'd entertain a motion to approve.
I'll move.
Have a motion from Mr.
Second.
Robinson,
Second.
second from Mickey and, was it Jeff or Dave?
Me.
From David. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. UTPB Small Business Development.
Make a motion to approve their budget as presented.
Second.
Thank you. I was looking for the number. I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Black Chamber, theirs, I remember, was 50,000.
Motion to approve.
Motion, Dr. Kurt, second, Mr. Navarette. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Current media,
Motion to, need a motion.
yes, sir. I was
Motion
gonna
to approve.
give that number, but I think
748, 950.
that includes the contingencies, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I have a motion from Dr. Kurt,
Second.
second from Mr. Navarette. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries.
Before we get to number 3, could we go back down to number 9? We really didn't discuss our general development plan.
Well, we were gonna
Well-
go back to it because we suspended the rules to do number 10. And that's what we're doing now.
Okay. The reason why I would like to I guess we got scrambled eggs now, to discuss this, item number 9, is because I think it has a direct bearing on number 3, and what we may, want to do there. So can we talk about,
We've just suspended rules. Can we jump around again?
Sure.
okay.
Okay, so, yeah, we're gonna go ahead and, I guess before we vote on item 3, we're gonna discuss item 9.
Okay, thank you. You know, looking back over our general development plan, and this is basically the same plan that we've had for a number of years. And, you know, we've had a growing amount of conversation. We had it in partnership meeting, we had it in other meetings that we've had about our need for workforce development. You know, traditionally, when you look back over the history of the ODC, and we kind of went on a history walk when we did budget at that time, and you look at the grants that have been done and the businesses that have been impacted, and all, you know, the vast majority of ODC's efforts and energies have been gone into the business expansion and retention. You know, if you go back even further than when ODC was first formed, you know, the real impetus behind it was an attempt to diversify our economy. And we went through an early phase of that with the call center, trying to attract call centers and all, because we had at that time, we had lots of help and no jobs. And that was a good match for that. It didn't last very long, because as soon as the oil field picked back up, we realized, diversifying in that way wasn't very good, because everybody left the less than stellar paying call center jobs to go to really good oil field jobs. And I think we've seen that before. You go back and our last, what I'll call our last big diversification win was close to 20 years ago, when we got the Family Dollar Distribution Center. That was something that was totally outside the oil field related area, and that was a good diversification play. When you begin to track forward to that, I think what you see a lot of that has occurred has been oil field related expansion, and that's fine. That's kind of who we are. Try as we might, and you look at any industry, including mine and retail, it all hinges somehow on the price of a barrel of oil. As things go up and people have more money, they spend more and they do more and they build more, and more things happen. I think, from where, as we've really looked at this, and we've looked at this a lot on advertising committee, it seems like the new arms race is going to be not getting companies in, but getting workers to work for companies. You see it all across the country happening. We kind of kicked it around at I think it was an advertising committee meeting or something, maybe it was partnership, and kind of everybody's just, wild-haired guess was that we could probably expand Odessa's economy by 20% if we could find the workers. The business is here, the work is here, the companies want to hire, they want to grow, they want to expand, they've got the ability to do that, they've got the capital to do that, they've got the buildings to do that. They don't have the people to do that. And so I think as we kind of move forward, I kind of see kind of a three-legged stool that we need to develop. One is our traditional business retention and expansion efforts. But instead of occupying, the vast majority of our time, energy, efforts, and money, we have to really focus and shift a lot of that to workforce development. And that's everything from training to recruiting to trying to get people. And I saw really interesting, I was somewhere out of town and the TV was on, and I saw an advertisement from Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota. And this was this whole ad that they put together talking about the reasons why you should move to South Dakota, and it was because they didn't have income tax, and they had a lot of jobs, and they had a lot of, and it was this outside recruitment deal that they were running these ads in another state saying, hey, we need you in South Dakota, come move here. And I thought that was really interesting. So it's it's a little bit of training, it's a little bit of recruitment, it's a little bit of everything to try to develop our workforce. And I think that that's going to take some very different approaches to things that we've done, and the way that we kind of spend our time and our effort and our focus. And I think that may require a different skill set, quite honestly, than maybe what we have today. There may be some other things that we have to bring into play as to how we do that. And it's certainly going to be, it's certainly in my mind going to have to be a partnership between all of the entities, our schools, our government, Texas Tech, UTV, the whole gamut of them. In order to figure out a way to, as Crow's kind of cleverly coined the 3 R's, to recruit, retain, and retire people here. And I know, and I know this is going to be a little bit of a touchy subject probably, but you know, as I've thought about this a lot through the last year, you know, is the, you know, I guess since day one, ODC has been contracting out their EDC to the chamber. And I think a lot of, when you look back over, a lot of communities, that's the way, ODCs and, or, you know, the economic development committees and all have done. I think you've seen more and more of those split off from the chamber, to be their own standalone, organizations. And I think there's probably a lot of reasons why that has happened. Probably chiefly among them is that, to make them, I've been a little bit confused, you know, even as I look at the, monthly emails and things like that come out of our economic development department. And I don't think because there's this overriding hedge of the chamber on layered over things, I think people think the chamber's doing that and not realizing that it's their tax dollars that are doing this work. Because everything comes out branded chamber and all, and I think that's a small portion of it, but I don't think people have a good idea of what we're doing. And I'm not sure that we're doing it to maximum effect, and particularly as we begin to look at the possibility that I'm proposing of really having to shift our focus from the traditional economic development, let's go recruit companies, to this whole idea of maybe of workforce development being our key component. I think the third leg of that stool is something that we've kind of batted around here too, but you know, is developing this idea. And I know in talking to some of the city council, I think they're very much on this page of making Odessa the easiest place in the world to do business. I don't think we're anywhere near that right now. I think I'm seeing some positive steps in that direction, which is encouraging to remove some barriers and some obstacles and just streamline some things and to make it easier. I don't think we're here, but I think ODC has a very important role to play in that as a liaison, as that glue that can bring people together to remove barriers and obstacles. Because I think what we find in every organization is there are some walls that get built up, and maybe they were built 20 years ago, but the wall's still there, and you know, it's kind of incumbent for somebody to come along and say, you know what, we need to get rid of that wall. We need to do that. I think we've seen us being able to do that in some regards, like when we had the first joint county, city, ODC meeting, and our whole purpose as ODC was really just to kind of bring the city and county together to see if we can't get some things done, like on the sales tax district, which are going to be very important for us moving forward. So I bring all this up to say, you know, I would like to see us, before we approve the budget for the chamber, is to really look at our general development plan, look at where we may want to go with this, and then make a decision of whether we feel like it's in our best interest as ODC to stay a part of the chamber or to take that in-house like so many other EDCs have done.
What do you feel the advantages would be to taking it out of the chamber? And I haven't heard anything specific about what the advantage is.
I think that there is some
Other than branding on emails.
Yeah, well, I think there are some conflicts. I think we see we've seen occasions where our EDC people are spending time working for Grow Odessa or doing other types of tasks like that are not ODC related, but yet we're getting billed for that. And I think there's just a lot of confusion and conflict at times of people not knowing really what we do, how we do it, and I'm not sure that we're being maximally efficient. I mean, you know, you go back to when we hired Tom, and I like Tom. I think Tom's done a very good job. But, you know, when Tom was hired, the ODC board at that time had very little input in that. They had a member on the committee of many other committee members. So we weren't even able to really have a lot of input on hiring our economic development director.
What would be
And-
the expenses?
Well, I think that's something that we need to, I think that's something that we'd need to work on. I don't know that we have an answer to that because we haven't really, you know, brought this up before.
It's my opinion that we've been a very successful economic development corporation. I don't think that that's something I'm ready to talk about without concrete reasons why it would be better, concrete reasons why it would save tax dollars.
So
Because to me, it seems it'd be more expensive.
I can see where Jeff's talking about. You know, we have seen a lot of economic developments across the state shift away from this Chamber of Commerce economic development model. And it's been very successful.
They haven't
And-
gotten the big projects that we've gotten in the last few years.
So let me ask you a question. So we have gotten a couple of big projects. There's no question, but I don't know that we can say that they wouldn't have come if we'd been in a different model at the same time. In addition to that, I think it would foster a lot more transparency that the board has with economic development.
How so?
Yeah, what do you mean by that? What's not transparent?
I think that, you know, for example, you know, the board really, other than the board setting the budget for economic development, we get reports later as far as the activity that they did do, but we don't get a lot of communication on activity that's gonna be done. You know, we're looking at going to this conference and this is why. And, you know, should we spend the
get that in
money
every monthly report.
to do this after the fact?
No, they tell us what they're going to be doing in the coming, I mean, that's been part of the reports traditionally, is what they're getting ready to do.
I would disagree with that.
Well, if you think it needs to be emphasized, that could easily be changed. Let's not forget that our contractor is the Odessa Chamber of Commerce. And that they utilize the Economic Development Department in order to fulfill that contract. So let's make sure we understand that. If we want the emphasis to change, then we can ask our contractor to change the emphasis. I think where we might be heading is to have ODC have its own employee or employees, staff and whatnot. And I don't think we want that. I mean, I didn't think we'd want to grow the government, which is basically what we're gonna be doing.
Not only that, but I don't wanna be, I mean, right now, the chamber handles all of the payroll taxes. That's a significant liability issue. They handle all of the benefits. Are we gonna make them city employees? We're gonna make them employees of ODC? There's a lot of complexity to
They
what
would
you're
be-
talking
Yeah,
about.
they would be employees of ODC.
Yeah, I know.
And I don't see any more
Okay, well,
liability at all,
I-
other than what we
You
currently
don't?
have. Not at all.
If the payroll taxes are not collected and remitted properly, whoever signs those payroll checks is personally liable. Personal liability, including a jail sentence. So, right now, I think we have a good situation where we're not an employer. There's a lot that comes with that, and, I mean, I personally couldn't devote full-time to overseeing employees. I don't think anybody on this board can. We all have jobs.
We're not asking them to do that. You know,
Who would do it?
well, technically, the only employee that the ODC board would have would be the executive director. Then the executive director has oversight
Staff
of all of their
under that.
employees, as would any business or any other entity. You know, the same thing, you know, it's the same thing when you look at the city. You know, city council has 4 employees. They don't have 800.
I suspect that a lot of this is coming from personal feelings that people have about the chamber and not out of a true sense that what we're doing isn't working somehow. If you could show me a weakness and show me how we'd be stronger by changing, then I think that's a conversation to have. But this is just generalities. If you don't like the way the emails are branded, they
Well,
can change
no,
the
I think-
branding.
But Melanie, you look at advertising, for instance, I mean, we put out, you know, I guess here's the question. When was the last time that ODC put out an RFP for our economic development department? If we're gonna contract, I mean, we've done that with other major expenses, such as with advertising, we do that from time to time. And as far as I know, in the history of ODC, we've never offered out and see, hey, could anybody else do this? It's always been a given that it was gonna go to the chamber every year.
Well, that's a different conversation than what you're talking about.
Well, I
If y'all
guess
wanna
I'm,
put out an RFP, I think that's a different conversation than, you know,
Yeah, I guess I'm sitting here thinking about, I mean, if we want to change our emphasis, if we want to add, I mean, we have in the general development plan, help build a skilled and educated workforce. We could expand that in the general development plan. If we want our contractor to place more emphasis on workforce issues, then we direct them to do that through our general development plan.
if we want their reports to have different
I don't-
content.
I don't understand why we would need, why we couldn't direct them to do that. I mean, seems logical to me that, you know, in fact, they've even proposed some money in there to do that, to establish some workforce programs. So that to me seems more of a logical step as opposed to starting to accumulate staff.
Creating more bureaucracy.
No, that I would say that, because then you'd say that we are the city and we're the governmental entity.
Well, we are. We're part of the city.
Are we?
Yeah,
So is the chamber. So is Discover Odessa.
Well,
So is, we can go on down the line. I mean, that one doesn't hold much water. I mean, it's already a
The chamber's
bureaucracy. You're
not
moving
an
from
entity
right
the
hand to
chamber
left.
is not a part of the city. It's a
It's a-
contractor.
It's a private entity. It's not an entity of the city.
We're a committee of the city.
We're not a committee. We are,
A wholly owned
how do they
corporation.
describe our entity? I need to look at our certificate of formation again.
I know, we went back through this before.
We're a
My question was,
municipal
are we a corporation
entity.
or are we separate?
We're corporations subject to the city council's directive.
do
Basically,
you
we
guys
are.
have any thoughts?
I mean, I just think that this discussion is really premature without any hard facts. I mean, how would we be more successful if we change? How are we less successful now? What is it gonna cost? What are the dollars?
Well, and that's why I bring it up today, is for those conversations to begin. Because I do think we need to take a hard look at it. We may at the end of the day come back and say, hey, this is the best way. But I'm not sure that in the, close to 30 years of ODC, I'm not sure that we've ever had that conversation. I mean, I don't go that far back with it, but I don't recall it, you know,
It's
ever.
come and gone, for sure. No
You know,
question
but-
about it.
But if we don't have the discussion today, then we're gonna agree into another contract and it's another year before we could make a change.
We can't have a firm discussion today because we don't have all the facts. You can't tell me right now what it's gonna cost to go, to have our own employees, have our own premises, all of this. You can't tell me what that's gonna cost and compare it to the cost of this contract. So why
That's-
would we?
That's true, and again, I wanna be clear, because this has been the first opportunity that I've seen on an agenda to have this discussion, is simply to have the discussion to see if there's any appetite on the board to explore other alternatives other than another year renewal on the chamber contract. That's my question. If the answer is yes, then we can begin to work on what those other alternatives may be and what they may look like.
So, in bringing up the RFP, when we put out the RFP for our grant audits and we put out the RFP for our advertising. Why didn't you suggest putting out an RFP for our economic development?
Well,
Arm, and
and
that-
perhaps we should have.
I mean, if this was an issue, why is it coming up?
You're assuming it
Now.
was an issue then.
Well, why is it an issue now if it wasn't an issue then? That was just a few months ago.
It just came up now. When you go through and you start looking at a budget
But
like
it
this, you
came
start
up for
having
what? Because of what?
multitude of things, everything from, is our staff, are they working really for the chamber, or are they working for economic development? Is our job as economic development for the board, hang on just a second, is our job for economic development board solely to be the funding organism for the chamber?
I don't think that
Or
we
what,
are.
what is our job for the board? I mean, is our job, we give some direction.
I'd rather be focused on the
But-
projects than focused on overseeing employees. And even if our executive director was the direct manager, as a board, it's always going to be our job to be where that buck stops if we're the employer. If ODC is the employer, this board has to oversee those employees. This board has to make HR decisions that right now are outsourced to our contractor. We get to focus on the economic development projects and where we want to go with that. We get to decide, hey, let's direct them to focus on workforce development. But we're not worried about who has X amount of vacation left and what kind of vacation policy do we want to adopt. That's not what we should be doing. We should be doing what we're doing, which is focusing on projects and what we can do to create stable employers in Odessa, Texas.
And I see that. And the question that I have, is there another contractor that can do it and do it better?
Put out an RFP.
Yeah, it's a little
You know.
bit late in the game right
So,
now.
and that's the question. I mean,
Budget
because the question today is this something we want to even explore? Or let's just move on like business as usual and do the same thing we've done for the last 3 decades and keep trucking?
May I answer, just to clarify a couple of questions that you all have when you're ready?
Okay, yeah, give me just what's that. So, I mean, that's, to me, is the question.
I mean, I think that if it's the board's feeling that we want to explore options for whatever reason, I think we need to express what that reason is. We wanted an RFP on the auditing for our grants because we weren't happy with how long it was taking for Weaver to get things done. We weren't happy all the time with their work product. We wanted to do an RFP on the advertising because it was the feeling that the costs had gotten too high and we wanted to see what we could do to save money. Or is it the feeling of the board that the costs of the current economic development contract are too high?
In some things, yes.
I've always felt like it shouldn't be so hard to give money away, spend $3 million a year in expense to give money away. It just seemed to me like it's a lot of money between advertising and Chamber of Commerce. Those two are the biggest bites out of it. The rest of them is administration, but it just seems like it's a great deal of effort that I don't think it should be that hard. I mean, I think we might have to take a different look, different approach. I don't know what it is, but I mean, form a committee and look into it, see how maybe somebody else is doing it. But those are two really big bites. I think the advertising has improved. It's in its infancy, the marketing part of it, and the chamber. I don't think I've seen the same thing. I mean, I'd like to go home with not so much money in the bank and it out working quicker than in what it's happening in a nutshell.
My guess is that this is the first time the chamber is hearing that y'all aren't happy with what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I'm just giving you my idea that it's takes a lot of money to give money away, and I never thought it'd be that hard.
I'd be interested to know what the expenses are to EDCs that have that are standalone.
Exactly.
I mean, if it's,
And I think
is it
that's,
really
We
less
agree.
expensive?
Yeah,
Is it
I
more
totally-
expensive?
That,
I agree.
that
I would
would be
totally agree.
But until
myself.
we know that, I don't
Yeah.
know why we're having this conversation.
Yeah.
We gotta have it sometime,
I mean,
you know,
if
if
the
we're doing
answer
our due job
is,
for due diligence.
if the
for-
answer is let's start doing some due diligence so that we can examine the costs and the benefits.
That's the question.
Then that's different than, you know, before we approve this, I mean, we're supposed to approve the budget next week. We're not gonna have this information in a week. Much less put out an RFP and get
Not
results.
if we do it well, I mean, if we do it well.
It needs to be, I mean, it's,
So would one of the solutions then be, as we've done in the past, is, okay, if we wanna explore this, do we put the chamber on a month-to-month contract instead of an annual contract?
I don't think we can do that.
Why couldn't we?
Because their responsibilities are so large and require
Such
planning
as?
out into the future. Why would they,
The majority
on
of their expenses
something-
would be marketing or advertising, which is now in a different deal. What kind of expenses
they
would we
also
need that are
do-
long-term commitments?
They also deal with site selectors. They deal with companies who are looking for a place to go. That takes more than 30 days. Why would they commit manpower and expense to a long-term project when their contract might be terminated on 30 days' notice? I don't think that that's useful for us. If you want to examine these things, I think we commit to the year project, the year contract. We spend the year in study, spend the year doing the due diligence, because that's how long it's going to take to do good diligence. If in 6 months we want to do an RFP, that gives us the time to do an RFP and have something to decide on in time for budget for the next year. This isn't something that can be done well if
The
it's done
projects
fast.
that they bring to us that we approve take months and years. They don't take 30 days. So that doesn't make sense to
Month-to-month
me.
contract won't work. That'll absolutely handcuff progress.
I don't see that, personally.
Would your business outlay effort and expense
$150,000 a month,
For-
all day, every day.
for stuff 9 months into the future, knowing that your contract could be terminated after 2 months?
well, but it's
And
not
then
like,
you're
but it's
out-
not like they're getting a bonus when that project lands. I mean, that's a little bit
No,
of a.
they're not. They
I mean,
don't,
They get paid.
they're not
But-
making
but-
money on
But
this.
for Chris's point, you know, yeah, $150,000 a month, which is, or $100,000 a month, which is about what the contract amounts to, sure.
I think that the way to do, if y'all want these questions answered well, and you want a good plan, I think that it's gonna take a year to do that,
And it may,
conservatively.
but I think we need to explore that possibility. As the board, I think we need to do our due diligence to see. And you may come back and say, you know what? This is the best deal on the planet and we need to stay with it. Great.
I don't think a month-to-month contract is fair to our contractor.
Yeah, I don't either.
Under those circumstances, with what it is they do. These are huge projects.
I understand. And our contractor would be free to turn that down. Ms. Earls,
Thank you.
I can tell your foot's tapping.
I think I can clarify a couple of your questions. It's interesting, Mr. Russell, that you talk about the three-legged stool, because that's really how I refer to our chamber. We are a three-legged stool. We are a 501c6. We are not part of the city. We contract with the city for services. Our one department, our one leg of the stool is our chamber membership. We refer to it as operations. We do events. Many of you have been to those. We focus on our members. Some of you are members and some of you are not. That's one leg. We have tourism, Discover Odessa. They receive hotel motel money to bring people here. That's the other leg. The third leg is economic development. We contract you for services. That is what these employees do. It's listed on your sheet. You know, you have the employees who do 100%. I am down there, I think, for about 35%. A lot of the work I do pertains to economic development for this community. But that is what they do. So I want to clarify, we are not part of the city. We receive money through 2 departments through a contract. The branding, it's called Chamber Economic Development. That's the department, that's who you contract with, but they do the work of Odessa Development Corporation. So if that is something that we need to work on, certainly, again, first time we've heard of it, I think Christy would absolutely be willing to work with us on that. I don't know what all is out there that says, that doesn't have ODC or economic development on it, but it doesn't say just Chamber of Commerce. And if it does, I'm not aware of that. The RFP part of it, when you put out the notice however many weeks ago to put in a budget for services, I think that is that RFP process. It was sent out, it was, it's posted. Anyone can certainly apply for that. Pertaining to Tom's employment, again, he is an employee of the chamber. We contract with you all, and when we had those interviews, the chairman of ODC, who was Tim Edgman, and David Boutan sat on that committee. So we felt like you were represented in that. In fact, it was, if I remember right, it was David and Tim, myself. David, do you remember who the other was? The chair of our board, the chamber board. But I think that was the ones who were included because, again, they do work for ODC. You did have presence there. Just like we talked about the budget earlier, just today, we probably had 30 checks that came out of the Economic Development Department to carry out this budget that go to vendors. And our person manages all of that. She keeps 3 separate books, and all of the economic development money that comes to us is in a separate fund at a separate bank. All of that is in your contract. So I don't think we could be any more transparent or accountable to you. And if you have other suggestions on how we can do that, we're very open to it. We are overseen by a board of 30 people. They approve our budget, they approve every financial every month. It is then sent to you. So you have a lot of eyes looking at the work that is being done. Talking about earlier, the cost of living question came up. We get that question a lot. I think there's a lot pertaining to economic development work because we're in it every day that you would be surprised, what people are looking at. And I'm a native Odessan, born and raised. I would not live anywhere else, but Odessa can be tough to recruit to. I'm with you, Mr. Robinson. You would think that it would be a lot easier than it is, but it's a tough sell. But we do it day in and day out, and we think that once you get here, it's wonderful, and we can't imagine why anybody would want to go elsewhere, but it can be a difficult sell. That point I made about our accountant, our controller, she's an incredible HR expert. And your part of the budget is about $49 some odd thousand. And I mentioned that hasn't gone up. That's not the true cost. That is just a cost that we pass to you. If we put her money in there, it's actually more. We've just chosen not to do that. And we could go up on that for her true cost. I think that pretty much covers my questions. Grow Odessa is 100% volunteers, and they are a huge economic development organization in this community, so it would be silly for us to not work with them. They've been around since the 60s, and that is a group of Odessans who have contributed money that will never get that money back. It is an open organization. People can be members of that. I think it's $1,000 buy-in. But that is all they do is economic development as volunteers. David, I think you're a member of that.
Yeah.
So.
I think there's a misconception of what it takes to do the economic development work. And if you want that scope to change, then we ought to be having conversations with our contractor to say, we want you to emphasize this, but I don't think we ever want them to stop trying to recruit and retain businesses here. I don't think we ever want them to stop creating jobs and stop expanding the tax base, which is primarily what they do. But again, we had some conversations earlier in the day about workforce issues. If we want that emphasis to be there, then we need to direct them in that regard.
Just today, I sent an email to Tom because as a chamber, again, workforce is a huge chamber across the country project. Just today, I received some information and I sent it to Tom saying maybe this is a way for economic development to focus on workforce. We received, and I sent it to Tom, one of the chamber organizations is having a workforce development program either in September or October, and because we're a member of the U.S. Chamber, they will pay for our expenses to attend that training and to see what's available. So I think as a chamber, I really, I work with chambers across the state, and the chambers who have the three departments, the tourism, the economic development, and the operations membership side of it, they're chambers that work very well together, and we're all right there together focusing on the community. Through the years, those who have chosen not to be together, I think have been based on personality issues, reasons that they're not happy with one or the other. And I think we're just one of the chambers that has continued to stay that way because we have worked together well all these years.
Question, just since I've got you, and this is just on a budgetary expense. So on the shared expenses that we have, how do we come up with those numbers as far as, how much goes to ODC, how much goes to the chamber? Is it based on?
Now,
And that could be anything from, rent, telephone coverage.
The rent is based on square footage. How much does economic development use as square footage? It's literally down to the square foot, and we have a layout of that. Operations gets billed.
For curiosity on my part, what's the total rent for the chamber?
About $10,000 a month. And I think on here I say that, I'm going by memory here.
Yeah, ours is 51,000.
Office rent,
So it's
yeah.
about
Yeah,
four-
but I mean, we literally have it down to a square footage, and I can get you that map. I mean, if you've been in the office, you know where they are. We have a kitchen and we have a basement. So, yeah, but that's how we figure the rent, based on square footage.
Okay. Things like the auto allowance, I'm assuming like Tom's car.
Yes, Tom's car, well, auto allowance is, I think it's mileage based, plus I think Tracy has a stipend, Tom has a stipend, and you pay a third of my stipend. Again, divided out.
Okay.
And they're all the same amount of money.
Him talking about the rent was a prelude to my question. I mean, when we know what the chamber's income is for us, and you say we're about a third, I mean, what are the chamber's other sources of income? And like Chris earlier gave us his numbers on membership and dues, and, I'd be curious to know, where we stand in the three-legged stool, in the arena with.
So our chamber has about 775 members. Our operations department, where all of the memberships go through, all of the events that we put on, it's a completely separate budget, completely separate bank account, and it's about $1 million. And then our visitation, Discover Odessa, Hotel Motel is a completely different account, different bank, and it's about a little over $1 million through hotel motel tax.
775 members contribute $1 million a year.
That plus we have a lot of events that are sponsors and things that another staff, they have nothing to do with those events. We have another staff that handles all of the operations.
And forgive me for thinking in the past, but years and years, I was a member of Chamber of Commerce, and we paid for a sticker to put on a door, Better Business Bureau, and that was the only support they had at the time. So, I never did investigate all the functions. I don't know what economic development was back 30, 40 years ago, but I do know that was the operation of the chamber at that time.
So we have, our operations department does our business after hours. We have networking events. We do the Entrepreneur of the Year, the Citizen of the Year. We have a holiday open house. We do a legislative breakfast. We're about to host a event for the city manager. So that, again, is all operations, basically special events and programs. Leadership Odessa. And again, that's operations, a completely separate group of people who works on that and a completely separate
But the
budget.
revenue generated, those events generate revenue and membership dues.
Yes.
And that's what.
About
that's what
50%.
funds it.
The dues are probably not even 30% of what we do
What's your total budget
for the
for the year?
chamber operations.
Well, I mean, everything. If you look at operations, Discover Odessa, ODC.
About 2.9. And again, 3 separate books. That's why that controller, yes, all audited by Weaver, and you all receive the economic development piece of that audit. But our controller does an incredible job. Plus, we have a 4th set of books for our foundation that is a 501c3. But hopefully that's answered some of your questions. I would welcome, any opportunity to sit down with you and hopefully try to better explain that. But, we talk about the chamber. The name the chamber is thrown around a lot. Well, the chamber has 3 separate departments with very specific duties. I oversee that, and I think our group does a fantastic job. We receive a lot of accolades. I'm proud of what we do. At the end of the day, we are all here to promote our community, to make it grow and to make it better for ourselves, for our businesses, for our children and grandchildren who follow us. We're proud of our community. We're the cheerleaders for the community. We're oftentimes the first one to get called when someone has a question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So at this second, we're on item 9, because we jumped back, and it's on the general development plan. So I guess my question is, I would entertain a motion one way or the other on the general development plan as to what we do with it at this point. Is either approve it as written, do we want to make changes to it?
Well, I think we ought to make changes to it because I think we talked about there's not enough emphasis probably in it with regard to workforce. It's got that one line item in there that I can see. There's probably others in there that I just don't recall, but it says help build a skilled and educated workforce. There probably needs to be more to that. The other thing is there's an oil and gas messaging program in there that if you remember, that was, Permanent Fuels America. Do we need to take that out of there, or are we going to continue to try to do that? I think it's something that needs to be done, but is it something we want to leave in there? And, we'll choose, this board can choose to do something in that regard if we think that's something we need to do, particularly at the state and the federal level. I didn't see there, do we not have a grant agreement for 1.5 yet? Because it wasn't listed in there.
Do we have one, Tom?
Yeah.
For 1.5?
Actually, I reached out to the consultants last week and said, I think we're still waiting on y'all to sign the copy on your end, because it's done on our end.
We probably ought to put something in there that at least says pending. It's not listed as one of those grant agreements that we've done.
Can I ask is there any, do we have to approve this general development plan tonight? Because one of the things we had suggested that Tom and I talked about was doing really a planning session for the board, which I think would be a lot better to get our general development plan together, and Seth is coming up, so this is gonna be good.
We have to do it annually. There's
You
no
do have,
question
you do have to
about
do it
it.
annually. You don't have to approve it at this meeting.
So it has
It'll
to be
the
done by
next-
when?
The next meeting,
Next meeting.
a week from
A
today.
week from today.
But that doesn't mean we can't change it.
Yeah, it can be amended just like any
Yeah.
other.
Yeah,
it's-
the other thing that I'd like to bring up in the general.
You still have a little bit of time, just so you know.
Thank you.
You know, in the general development plan is the infrastructure program. You know, I can't for the life of me really understand how that ever got tasked to ODC, because it's really, the majority of what that infrastructure is developing is retail and office and things like that in the downtown corridor. Yeah, the
It
downtown.
comes out of our promotions budget. It doesn't come out of our, that's how it happened. Is the only way, we have a 10% of our annual budget that can be allocated to promotion. And with that 10%, we can pay for virtually anything that promotes the city of Odessa. That's why the facade and infrastructure grant program for downtown is inside of that 10% promotional deal. It's not.
It's promoting
it's not
downtown
2
revitalization.
4A
Yeah.
dollars.
It's promoting downtown
Yeah,
revitalization.
That's
Okay.
how it's in there.
Never seen that.
Is that, I guess part of my question is, and I serve on this board, I also serve on the Tiers Board. In a lot of ways, this seems much better fitted to the Tiers Board and what they do and what that program set up than it does it's wedged into ODC, even if we we got a little bit of a 10% pot, we can kind of do as we want to, for the most part. But is that something that we want to continue to look at funding, or do we want to?
Is Tiers set up to take over on that?
It hasn't been discussed. That would be discussions we would have to have.
Could you fund it?
Does
Could
Tiers
we
have
fund?
money?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Tiers could fund it. I mean, Tiers certainly doesn't have the money that ODC has. You know, total Tiers revenue is about $200,000 a year. But we've also, that money has largely been money in search of a project, for lack of a better description. I mean, it's,
How much did we spend last year on infrastructure and facade ballpark? I know it's in there, some of y'all are faster than me at finding it.
yeah, we got 150,000, well, that's facade. Where's the
The
infrastructure at?
facade grants are really
Yeah, infrastructure is the
small.
one that's open, because it's the percentage that's a budget, but I was wondering what we actually spent.
There's no,
Infrastructure grants, we
there's
don't.
not an actual here.
So we spent 50,000 in 20 to 21, nothing in 21 to 22.
We had a couple of pretty
49,000
good.
in 18 to 19. That's just on facade, but infrastructure.
Help us out here, Larry. Are you on that too? Melanie? Who's on that?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I don't know the number, I
How much
mean,
we spent
I
last
don't
year?
commit to memory
Facade
the
infrastructure?
numbers spent.
come on.
We'd have to have, I need to see it's not something I commit to memory.
I was gonna try to compare that with kind of what
I mean, it'd
tiers.
be, I think that's valuable to the discussion.
On,
And
you're
I
asking
think-
on infrastructure?
Infrastructure and
downtown
facade.
infrastructure
This year,
grants.
quite a bit. I mean,
We had a couple big ones
the
in there.
wine place over there, a couple
Yeah.
$100,000.
The infrastructure ones can be high.
Yeah, it's pretty high,
It would exceed the entire Tiers budget, I think,
yeah.
if you're saying it's 150,000 a
Yeah,
year.
about 200,000 a year.
It was
So-
it was up against the maximum,
Yeah,
and we've got another one looking at now that is too.
I mean, I don't think that we can just foist that program off on somebody else if they're not prepared to.
And last year we budgeted 275, which was close, but.
Well, and again, I bring that up as a point of discussion, you know, I'd like to at least discuss that with Tiers and maybe with city council too, because ultimately, they're gonna have to weigh in on that just to see. Because it's always seemed a little odd to me that this was in ODC.
Well, and again, I mean, we find ourselves, because we have to approve all of this next week, we find ourselves in a position to approve it for the next year, and perhaps having those discussions over the year.
One of the good things about this is it's not a contract with a vendor, so,
Yeah.
you know, we can
Yeah.
come in and amend this just like we can our budget, so that's pretty cool.
And there
so.
could very well be some grant requests in process, what now, that we're not
Right.
talking about.
I believe
don't
that
know.
there's at least one in process, isn't there, Larry?
Yeah, we still have to budget for those.
Yes, there-
So, I mean, I guess on the development plan, I don't have a problem, any problem accepting it as is, but I would like for us to set up, whether it's a workshop or planning session or whatever we wanna call it, you know, to really dig into that and really update it. I suspect that hasn't been updated in a long, long time.
Well, I think, let me comment on that too. I think when somebody was talking, and I think Chris brought up doing some kind of a,
Planning session.
strategic planning session, we ought to come up with probably a 5-year plan. The general development plan should be an incremental part of that. It ought to be updated on an annual basis. It ought to be part of that. So we're actually taking the planning process and to a little bit longer term, which is not bad at all. But I do think that there ought to be some more emphasis in here on workforce issues, because it sounds like there's a sentiment of the board for that. But other than that, we could approve it with that change, and then we could amend it.
Work on it.
What would you guys think about that? Moving forward, I can put an item on the agenda for just our general development plan to see if anybody wants to bring in changes that month for us to discuss.
What prior chair did, Chris? Prior chairs? And I know we didn't do it in 2020 because of COVID, but prior chairs set up a workshop where we had dedicated time, more than what we've had today, to go through the budget with our contractors weeks in advance of approval of the budget, as well as discussion of the general development plan that they would be responsible for. We had big workshops and did all of that. So that's the way we've done it before.
With a lot of our changes with the city and financial department and those type of things, it made it kind of tough, but I think it's something we need to consider to do for the future, for sure.
Sure.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
I recommend we tweak the language with regard to workforce emphasis for next week, and then next week
can vote on this next week.
consider approval as presented, and then agree that we're going forward. If we want to tweak it, we'll amend it. No reason not to do that. I also think that we need to consider, because I do think it would be unfair to go on a month-to-month basis with economic development, because that's long-term work that we're doing, we're working with prospects and whatnot. I think we ought to, you had a question about the advertising piece in it, Jeff? I mean, do we want to move that to Media Concepts to take care of that? Or, I mean, that line item, we could do that? Do you want to approve some monies in there for workforce, some monies in there for land development? I mean, do we want to do that? Those are the main changes. The other thing is the straightforward work of recruiting new businesses and retaining existing businesses, creating jobs and expanding the tax base.
Is that in the form of a motion?
Well, we can't
Well,
yet.
there are two-
There's two. Right now, we're on the general development plan, so.
So I would make a motion on the general development plan that we simply kind of punt to next week. We work on the language a little bit, and see if we can't, beef up in particular, the workforce development. I'm not sure it's really critical that we do it right now. So long as we kind of have an understanding that at some point in the near future, we're gonna meet again, and maybe really hash out what that means. I mean, it's been, I know workforce, we've talked about it a lot, Tom's talked about it a lot, we talked about it at partnership. There's a lot of pieces there. And I'm not sure that we have a real good idea if I were to turn to Tom today and say, hey, Tom, give me a workforce development plan that only covers all these. I don't think you would have that, and I wouldn't expect them to. Because I think it's something that's going to have to evolve over, many months of work with everybody to really formulate a plan. So, I mean, I really don't even have a problem, accepting the general development plan as is, as a, for lack of a better term, a placeholder, until we can find the time to do some work on it and really continue to flesh it out.
Let's do that. Then we can get a planning session scheduled, a workshop, so that we can talk about those, because there'll be a lot of other things that are coming up. Water's coming back up as another issue, and some opportunities for us that I think we can.
I would really like to see us put some more emphasis on workforce, because we know that's what we want. And if we're gonna approve this next week, let's approve what at least we know we want.
Yeah, we can put some wording in there
Yeah.
next week for it.
I mean, I'll be glad to work with Tom. I've volunteered Tom, but for us to come up with some proposed, language in there built around workforce development and all for.
Okay.
Well, I would second that motion.
So I have a motion and a second to table it for now and come back with some wording.
Will y'all make sure
Yeah.
y'all present the board with a red line?
Yes.
So we can see what the changes
Yeah.
are. and how it's-
And we'll probably, what I would suspect, and I don't know, but yes, we can do that. What I suspect we do is we'll bring you a whole new block on just workforce.
I mean, even if it's general right now, while we do the work of fleshing it out, I think
Yes.
that's good.
Okay.
Like it.
Excuse me, for clarification, what was the motion? Was that motion to table, or was it the motion to provide the emphasis on workforce
We're
development?
going to table until next week.
Thank you.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Takes us to our last item, which is item 3, discussion and review of the economic development contractor proposal from the Odessa Chamber of Commerce.
I think we've done that at length.
Yeah, but we didn't approve like we did these other line items.
I move that we approve the economic development proposal for a one-year contract
As presented.
as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. Motion passes. Any other business before ODC? All right, then if it's all okay, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we're adjourned.